In at number 10 is Beltane. Beltane is a mutant you may likely not have heard of. Her real name is currently unknown, but we know she was part of a group of Romani gypsies. She was captured by the Latvarian monarch and awesome supervillain Dr. Doom and experimented on, which activated her latent mutant abilities, and also set off her desire to overthrow his rule with a group of other escapees. Now, Beltane's ability is the secret weapon of her group. She has the ability of fear projection, which means that she can physically project a manifestation of whatever the person she is facing most fears, psychically messing with and almost torturing her victims. So when fighting Wolfsbane, for example, Beltane made the hero see a projection of her not so nice father. Probably a mistake, as Wolfsbane eventually took her down in an animalistic rage, but hey, it's still a cool power. Coming in at number 9, Wolfsbane. Speaking of Wolfsbane, Rain Sinclair has the mutant ability that I wish I had when I was a kid. She can turn herself into a wolf at will and can even go into a transitional form that is basically a close to a werewolf without being a werewolf type of thing. In fact, she is basically a werewolf, but with none of the drawbacks of the monster. She retains all her faculties, minus not being able to talk and just being a little bit feral, and is not forced to change only at night. Rain grows much larger than her human form when she changes and gains access to some enhanced strength, which, coupled with the body of a wolf, grants her enhanced speed and reflexes as well. She gains heightened senses similar to a wolf. The thing with Wolfsbane is that she is both a wolf and a human, so she gains the benefits of both, like almost stacking on top of each other. Unlike wolves, or humans for that matter though, she does have an enhanced healing factor and enhanced vision as well, so double thumbs up. Number 8, Abigail Brand. Abigail here is an interesting character. She is technically a human-alien hybrid, as her father hails from the planet Axis, but it's actually her human mother who Brand inherited her mutant abilities from, that allowed her to join S.H.I.E.L.D. and then Sword as an agent and hero. So what are said abilities? Well, she has a form of pyrokinesis known as tactile pyrokinesis, which means that Brand can coat at least her hands in flames that are potent enough to burn through most metals via tactile contact. She can use her abilities to warm up others, but has enough control that she can also set others on fire. So she has some versatility with said abilities. I somewhat kind of prefer her form of pyrokinesis because, I don't know, I just swear there are way too many fire-based heroes who seem to all do similar things. So at least Abigail has her own brand of fire. Sorry, the dad jokes are in full force today. Number 7, Primal. Adam Berman first appeared in X-Men Unlimited number 16 in July 1997, and his story arc was one I actually had a good time reading. It was oddly unique, at least to me. Adam is a mutant, but his ability is a transformative one, and he can easily hide it, which allowed him to kind of play himself off as a non-mutant even though he was trying to join the Xavier Institute. That's what I gathered at least. It was kind of confusing. So you should read his story, but we are here for his abilities, not his story. And those said abilities almost remind me of other superpowered beings like the Hulk and even the Lizard, because Adam can transform into a totally primal reptilian-like form, growing about 50% bigger than his normal self and gaining red glowing eyes. But his physical enhancements are quite impressive. His strength boosts to around a level 10, with the highest level being a 100. But level 1 super strength is capable of pressing 800 pounds through a 25-ton range, so level 10 is nothing to scoff at. Look, just go read his story, okay? Number 6, Adam X. Another Adam! Almost like I liked that name or something. Adam Nuramani is honestly a bit more interesting than the last Adam though. He was a genetically created hybrid of both Emperor Deken of the Shi'ar Empire and Catherine Summers of Earth, created in an attempt to introduce more genealogies to the Shi'ar Empire. Now just as his origin is unique, so are his powers. Adam has the ability of electrokinetic hemopyrokinesis, or if you don't want to hurt yourself like I just did, you can also say sanguine combustion, which also sounds super cool. It basically means that he can send an electric surge through oxygenated blood, which leads to ignition of the electrolytes present in said blood, causing a person to burn from the inside out, which could result in a little subtle warming effect, or it could completely disintegrate a person. So there's a lot of wiggle room here, which is cool. But thanks to his Shi'ar side of things, he also has enhanced strength, agility, reflexes, stamina, speed, vision, and healing. So couple all that with his awesome fighting skills and the cool cybernetic retractable claws, and Extreme is someone you don't want to mess with. Number 5, Multiple Man. Multiple Man has such a crazy, interesting power. Okay, so I should say for starters that he isn't technically a mutant. Jamie, or James Madrox, is actually a changeling, which is a sort of genetic precursor for mutants who gain their abilities at birth instead of having their X gene activated later on, like in puberty or whatever. For James, his power is that of duplication. He can duplicate himself multiple times upon impact, and each of his dupes can create one single dupe. One of the real benefits of his power though is that the Prime Madrox will retain any memories of his dupe's experiences. So let's say you had to read like 10 books in a week. Well, you could have like 10 dupes all read one book each, and then when they re-merge with you, you have all of their memories of each book, if that makes sense. Multiple Man is like an information gathering powerhouse. He can also use the ability to learn skills, like one of his dupes trained as a Shaolin monk and trained in meditation. One was a trained EMT, one audited an anatomy class for 6 months, one passed the New York bar exam, one claimed to be the world's greatest detective, and just stuff like that. In his self-title coming from 2018, he even goes into a future world that is completely ruled by Madri, which is the plural for Jamie's dupes. I'd love to see his potential shown in the MCU or something, it would just be so entertaining. And at number 4, Blink. Do you know in the beginning of the X-Men Days of Future Past live action movie when there's that really cool fight scene in the bunker between some mutants and the ultra advanced Sentinels? Now you know that mutant that was firing out portals and stuff and doing all that jazz? That is Blink, and she is so cool. Clarice Ferguson's power has a few different uses. Obviously there are the bright pink portals, but she can also throw that same energy as a sort of missile that will teleport those, or even parts of those, that she hits. The range of her power is actually quite impressive, as it has a potential range of as far as the moon and back, which is pretty freaking far, if you know. With the potential of her abilities and the cool way it is used, and even just how awesome it looks, you'd think she would have done a lot more, but she seems to not really have a whole lot of meaningful appearances. Except, if you want to see her being as amazing of a character as she should be, find her in Age of Apocalypse. So cool. Number 3, Firestar. Another pretty powerful mutant who just hasn't had any key moments to speak of. Angelica Jones, also known as Firestar, has the awesome mutant ability of microwave energy manipulation and generation. She uses the Earth's electromagnetic field and converts it into microwave radiation. She also absorbs microwave radiation from her environment and from stars in the galaxy. She can then focus this energy at targets or to do different things. She can set targets on fire, explode them, and even melt them. She is consistently keeping her powers in check because she has the potential to damage the entire Earth and its atmosphere with her abilities, which is why she is even more powerful in space, where she isn't limited by the fragility of the Earth. Out in the cosmos, she has been able to easily produce an attack that injured Garthon Saul when he possessed the energy of the entire Nova Corps. And she also used her abilities to power a massive Shi'ar interstellar transport gate with very, very little effort. She's even been able to disrupt the psionic powers of others using her own power. Most impressively, Emma Frost. She is still young and learning to use her powers, but she needs to be more than just one of Spider-Man's friends because she is a powerhouse of potential. And at number 2 is Husk. Paige Guthrie is part of a family that has a lineage of mutant abilities. Sam Guthrie, Cannonball, Joshua Guthrie, Icarus, Melody Guthrie, Arrow, and Jebediah Guthrie, who doesn't have a superhero name. Paige's power is a wee bit unorthodox though. She has the ability to shed her skin, and by concentrating on specific chemicals or elemental formulas, she can cause the layer of skin underneath to be a different element or shape or state. She can become any solid that she has studied and can imitate metal, diamond, granite, wood, rubber, and even glass. She's been shown to turn into a sharp-toothed lizard once, which is weird. She doesn't have perfect control over her abilities at this point in time, but when she transforms, she obviously gains different abilities depending on what she turns into. She's granted herself super strength and durability, flame generation, and many other different things. Her shedding lets her get rid of dirt or sweat and even minor injuries, which is both cool and kind of a little freaky, but she has all kinds of potential if she is given the time to properly train her powers. And in at number 1, Megan or Megan or Megan or however you want to say it. If you were a fan of Excalibur in the late 80s and early 90s, then you'll likely know who Megan is. That's with 2 G's. Megan is a unique character like most of the mutants are. She's a mutant empath with the ability to shapeshift, but she is also an elemental of great power, and she's even got a dose of fairy heritage. Her list of abilities is a little hard to define, as it is with most shapeshifters, and it can even be augmented by her connection with the earth. She is transformed into a Godzilla-like dragon that could breathe fire, and even a werewolf-like creature with all the enhancements that can afford. Megan has also shown through her environmental connection and mutant empath abilities to be able to adapt to situations and also to the emotions of those around her. So for example, she can grow gills and fur, or become prettier when those around her think she is ugly. She can also turn into other superhumans as well, gaining their powers but with less potential, which even worked when she became a female version of the Silver Surfer, which is kind of nuts. She is resistant to reality warping powers, and she even has a true form where she can manipulate elements, fly, and manipulate magical energies. She is a highly capable mutant and character, she just hasn't really done a heck of a lot since the 90s, and that's a shame. Number 10. Artie. Arthur Artie Maddox is an interesting one. His mutant abilities manifested when he was just 11 years old, leaving him disfigured and mute, but granting him the very interesting ability of visual telepathy. This means that Artie can connect to his or others' thoughts, and he can project those thoughts as psionic holograms or pictograms. This is really useful for Artie, specifically as he is a mute, but at the same time, I gotta say I think that regular telepathy would kind of be a bit more useful, and I don't know. Doesn't matter, because Artie's power is more cool, because he can even make large-scale holograms and use them in battle, usually for defense. But Artie can also perform something called a mind lock that allows him to paralyze someone physically or mentally. I kinda hope he keeps evolving his powers, but we'll see. Number 9. I Scream. I Scream, that's I, like this, or Scream, like is a villain of the X-Men who decided he needed to destroy the X-Men using their danger room. He actually got pretty far in that plan too, and he was able to overload Cerebro, taking down Professor X temporarily. Now I'm going to assume he did that by giving the device a brain freeze, because if you hadn't guessed, Ice Scream can turn into any flavor of ice cream, and then everyone screams for Ice Scream's ice cream. No, that's not true, sorry. But using his abilities, he was able to enter the X-Men's mansion and the danger room before Xavier came back too and lowered the temperature in there, freezing Ice Scream's ice cream form, which is when a clown turned him into a banana split and split from the scene. Just go read Anoxio the Clown from 1983, you'll get it. Make sure you guys check out the other videos in this series and drop a like on this video to show us your support. Number 8. Peeper. Peeper, or Peter Quinn, first appeared in Captain America Annual number 4 in May 1977 as part of Magneto's new Brotherhood, a brotherhood of verbally based villains: Slither, Shocker, Lifter, Burner, and Peeper. Seems like a bit of lazy writing over at Marvel to me, but this group actually went under a couple different names under a couple different leaders, including Mandrill and the Red Skull. Peeper though is definitely the most interesting of the bunch, and he's also more relevant as he has appeared recently as part of Abigail Brand's sub-team called the Six. On this team, Peeper played the role of the Eye, using his abilities to examine Chiron or Kerbon particles. That's because Peeper has the gift of telescopic, microscopic, and X-ray vision using his enlarged eyes, but he also had an offensive ability in the form of yellow or red concussive optic blasts. He also seems like a decent dude, despite usually being a villain. Number 7. Bruce Brew. Saying that a mutant is unique kind of feels redundant, as most mutants have pretty unique abilities from others of their kind, but Brew is even more unique, as he is not a mutant of the human race. Instead, Brew is a mutant of the incredibly violent and parasitic insectoid alien race known as the Brood. This essentially means he can actually feel compassion and friendship, and he was born separately from the Brood hive mind, meaning he is not loyal to a Brood queen. He also possesses super genius levels of intelligence, making him one of the smartest students at Jean Grey's School for Higher Learning. So, Brew's X gene mutation is only really mental or psychological in nature, but being a Brood, he brings natural body armor and fanged jaws to a fight, and recently, Brew actually consumed a king egg, making him king of the entire Brood species, including the Brood queens. Number 6. Big Bertha. Bertha Crawford, originally Ashley Crawford until she changed her name, had the mutant ability of total control over her body's physical size and mass. She can add or take away hundreds of pounds to herself at will, controlling her figure. This allowed her to become the highest paid fashion model in America at one point, but also allowed her to don the Big Bertha superhero persona. Using her abilities to add bulk and mass, she actually increases her durability and her strength to a peak of lifting 50 tons, allowing her to jump huge distances like the Hulk. No matter what size Bertha alters herself to though, she has a high level of athleticism. Ashley rebranded herself into a plus size model, which is when she changed her name to Bertha, and you know what? She still kinda killed it. Good job. Number 5. Decimus Furious. Decimus Furious actually began his life all the way back in ancient Rome, where his mother and father took their own lives, leaving Decimus homeless on the streets. In 281 AD, on the cusp of the afterlife due to his hunger, his mutant powers activated. This gave him super strength and durability, alongside an extremely bestial form similar to like a minotaur, but almost as if it was made of stone. He's really super cool looking, honestly. But his more powerful ability would be empathic war infection. This basically means that Decimus can infect anyone who he strikes with a thirst for war, which will send them into a rage-filled state. It also acts as a defensive tool against telepaths who try to read or control his mind, causing the war infection to overcome the telepath. He has also been shown to be able to piece himself back together after being blown up, which is funny because he blew up when Phantom X made him feel love, which did not compute, and he just went boom. He became Apocalypse's final horseman of war. Number 4. Warpath. James Proudstar is the younger brother of John Proudstar, also known as Thunderbird, and he always idolized his brother, but in that idolization he actually limited his own powers to a degree. Mostly, his mutation boosts up his physical capabilities, granting him super strength that has had various different levels, once having Hulk levels of strength, but another time struggling to fight an alligator. He can run at 100 miles per hour, and his stamina allows him to exert himself for 24 hours without rest. He can withstand a hell of a lot more than a regular human, like falling several stories or being hit with energy blasts. His agility and reflexes are increased to the point of dodging bullets, and his senses allow him to see in the dark and hear sounds other humans can't. After some training with Pete Wisdom, Warpath has shown the ability of self-propelled flight and a regenerative healing factor. What's really interesting is that while working with Ghost Rider, James gained shamanistic abilities like perceiving spirit energy. He's also probably one of the best mutant combatants, whether it's unarmed or armed with his vibranium daggers. Number 3. Gideon. I believe Gideon here is the first external to make this list. The externals include immortal mutants like Selene and Apocalypse, but they all share a psychic link which separates them from other immortal characters. Gideon was born during the 15th century, and aboard Christopher Columbus's first expedition, he actually succumbed to scurvy, and his life was changed forever when he resurrected and gained his mutant abilities. Like all externals, Gideon is immortal and no longer ages. He can also resurrect himself, as confusing as that sounds since he's immortal, but unique to him is the ability of power mimicry, giving himself the powers, advanced skills, and talents of any being, android, or even battlesuit, and he's been able to gain the powers of 3 people at once. But more than that, his powers allow him to fully understand how to use that other person's powers to the point that he can even overcome the original user of said power. Number 2. 2. Cypher. Cypher, or Doug Ramsey, has omnilingual translation abilities, and considering that communication is an essential part of our everyday lives, whether that be with other humans, devices, or even our own selves, I'd say he's pretty powerful. He can translate language of literally any origin, even alien. He can read and decipher codes, including computer code, as well as read body language, subtext, and unspoken intention. More recently, everything he sees is interpreted as information, meaning he basically kind of just reads life. He can read body language to the extent he is able to predict people's moves before they make them. He can learn and perform spells for magic users, and he even created his own overly complex language that makes him immune to psychic mind reading. But Doug actually merged with Warlock, essentially giving Doug techno-organic shapeshifting abilities on top of everything else. And for our number 1 spot, we are going to talk about my number 1 favorite X-Men, Nightcrawler. Kurt Wagner was first introduced in Giant Size X-Men number 1 in April 1975, with the mutant ability to biophysically displace himself into the Brimstone dimension, travel through it with a subconscious sense, and then return back to our dimension in a different location, essentially teleporting. This all happens so fast it's almost instant, and it always is accompanied by the signature BAMF sound. Although he can teleport really far, even across the world more recently, he avoids teleporting to places he hasn't been before, or places he can't see, as he can accidentally end up appearing within solid matter, which could potentially end his life. Although he does have a small amount of spatial awareness that at least keeps his feet from teleporting into the ground, and he can even use the little demon things known as BAMFs as teleportation beacons that allow for teleportation to places he hasn't been before, even across dimensions. Through his unique physiology, he gains a few extra abilities as well, like a prehensile tail, microsuction hands and feet, and flexible bone structure, but he can also camouflage himself, bending light using the Brimstone dimension. But what a few might not know is that he actually became immortal thanks to the fact that recently he sacrificed his soul in heaven to come back to life, which is good because I never want to lose this legendary blue mutant. Number 10 is Spike. I talked about Marrow in part 8, so it's only fair that I talk about the animated X-Men Evolution character known as Spike. Spike, or Evan Daniels, was actually the nephew of Aurora Monroe, but his mutant powers are much different than hers. Similar to Marrow, Evan can manipulate his bones, causing it to project through his skin to create armor and bone spikes that he can use as melee weapons, or he can even launch the spikes from his body as projectiles. Unlike Marrow though, Spike's bones piercing through his skin and being broken off or fired as projectiles doesn't actually hurt him, which is a huge benefit. What's super interesting though is that after some time with the Morlocks, Spike was able to make his bone spikes so hot they were almost on fire, which actually kind of raises more questions that go unanswered than anything else. In at number 9 is Avalanche. You don't often get Greek mutants, which makes Dominic Petros a pretty unique character already. Dominic came from the Greek island of Crete, which is somewhere I desperately want to travel to, so if someone can hook me up with that, that'd be great, thanks. Like a lot of mutants though, he started out as a villain. Originally part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, then X-Corps, Project Wide Awake, Freedom Force, and Villains for Hire. He's gotten around, and with the destructive capabilities of his powers, it honestly kind of makes sense. Avalanche can create super powerful vibration waves from his hands. These waves can cause matter to shatter or crumble, and if he uses it on the earth or even large buildings, he can basically create earthquakes or, wait for it, avalanches. But Avalanche has quite the control over this ability, able to move objects, create tidal waves, cause the ground to move or shatter, or even ride waves of earth as transportation. And he even used his abilities to be a fantastic landscaper. If you guys are enjoying this content, I beg of you, slap that thumbs up button. It's the only thing you can do to prove you're loyal to me. I mean, to show your support. Number 8. The Blob. The Blob, or Frederick Dukes, is one of those characters I really didn't give enough credit to when I was growing up. He can actually do some pretty cool things, and some things that didn't even occur to me. His actual main mutant ability, for example, is that he can essentially become immovable by creating a monodirectional increase of gravity beneath him that extends out about 5 feet in radius from his center of balance. But what's even cooler is that with some training, Blob was able to manipulate his gravitational aura outwards in order to trigger a localized implosion. Also, the Blob is incredibly durable. The fat on the Blob is able to absorb the impact of rifle bullets, cannonballs, bazookas, and even torpedoes. He has even been able to survive being hit by a meteorite that was 50 feet in diameter moving at terminal velocity, which is insane. But that's not all. Blob is also able to manipulate his body, basically shapeshifting to a degree. After undergoing the Mother Vine enhancement process, Blob even developed a secondary mutation, liquid form, and here I thought he was just incredibly fat. Number 7. Caliban. If you have seen Logan, then you'll recognize Caliban as the bald, seemingly albino mutant who hangs out with Logan and Professor X. In that movie, he displays Caliban's main ability, which is being able to detect mutants' X genes, usually within about a 25-mile radius. Although, it's worth noting he has been able to detect particularly powerful mutants from further away before. But what I want to talk about is Caliban's other power that most people don't know. It's called his flight or fight response. So whenever Caliban feels stressed, he manifests 2 extra powers: super strength that can overpower Spider-Woman, and fear absorption. This second power allowed Caliban to absorb the psionic energy created in the fear from others and amplify it back into his environment, doing things like very quickly turning those nearby into a fear-induced panicking mob. This ability was boosted by Apocalypse twice when Caliban served him as both death and pestilence. Number 6. Frenzy. Joanna Cargill, like a lot of the X-Men, started off as a villain. She ran away from her home after her mutant powers activated, and she caused the passing of her not-so-great dad in self-defense. From there, she would join Apocalypse's Alliance of Evil, where she would do battle with the X-Men. She would go on to join the Acolytes and eventually the X-Men too. Now, she works as an agent of S.W.O.R.D. on Abigail Brand's X-Men Red Team. So, with a history like that, she has got to have some cool powers. Well, Frenzy's main power is invulnerability. She possesses steel-hard skin, which has only ever been penetrated by adamantium. She's also highly resistant to extreme hot and cold, as well as radiation, and she can withstand high impact forces like Cyclops' optic beam or a punch from She-Hulk. Speaking of She-Hulk, a byproduct of Frenzy's power is that she has super strength as well, enough to lift around 25 to 75 tons and punch Jennifer Walters back if she wants to. Number 5. Typhoid Mary. Okay, so if you know who the Mutant Legion is, the one who has hundreds of different alternate personalities that all have different mutant powers, well, Mary Walker is sort of like that, only for Mary, she has only a handful of alternate personalities, and they just allow her to access the powers that just Mary can't access. Those powers include limited amounts of pyrokinesis, telekinesis to move small objects, grabbing her dropped weapons or even turning objects into armor, and telepathy, usually used to manipulate others or influence people to do things without thinking, like kissing her or grabbing their weapons. Her Mary persona is a pretty quiet and timid person with no actual powers, but her other main persona is Typhoid, who is more adventurous, lustful, and violent. She later adopted a few other personas like Bloody Mary, who was sadistic and brutal and pretty much hated all men. Kind of understandable, sort of. And Mutant Zero, who was a cold, calculated, and militaristic person. Number 4. Mask. The Morlock leader, Mask, has a pretty ironic ability. He himself is not exactly the most gorgeous of beings, but his abilities allow him to alter the appearances of others through touch, molding their bodies and features like clay, or just mentally influencing the change he desires. He can alter people's hair and skin color, body structure, and several other features, including turning limbs into tentacles. Mask can also use his powers in combat by making an enemy's limbs attached to their body, like that, or by closing their breathing orifices to limit their combat prowess. His powers of body manipulation later evolved so that he could alter his own flesh, but the new limits of his powers were stated to be a secondary mutation by Charles Xavier. Apparently, when Mask's body was pierced by Shatterstar's sword, Mask instinctively altered his own internal organs to help him survive, and ever since, he's been able to modify his own body. But what he can do exactly in terms of modifying his own body hasn't really been told yet, so we don't really know. Number 3. Christine Cord. Although Christine Cord, now going by Longstrike, doesn't actually have any mutant powers anymore after M-Day, she used to actually go by the name Tattoo, because her mutant ability was a chameleon skin that allowed Christine to form words or patterns on her skin which she could use to camouflage herself or convey messages. But she actually has a secondary ability in the form of biophasing. This basically meant that Christine was able to move through matter, and if she reached into another person, which is a terrifying thought, she could disrupt the neurochemistry of a person and or alter their molecular composition. Unfortunately, we won't know what else she could have possibly done because after losing her abilities and joining the New Warriors, she unfortunately did not live for too much longer. And at number 2 is Jeb Lee. Jeb Lee is one of the final horsemen of the mutant Apocalypse. He was chosen as Famine after Apocalypse watched Jeb using his drums at Gettysburg during the Civil War. Now, using his drums made Apocalypse choose Jeb as a horseman? Yes, it did, because Jeb has an incredibly unique mutant ability, which is to transmit a bio-auditory cancer that feeds on the flesh of all who can hear it whenever he makes a tapping noise, whether that be with his drums or even just tapping his fingers on a table. Jeb has a pretty, dark past, as you can probably imagine. Lee was a Confederate spy during the United States Civil War, walking the battlefields dressed as a Union soldier. Now, after returning back home, his Union Army uniform was discovered and his family was burned alive, which manifested his mutant powers. He then used these powers to go back to war, marching from battle to battle and taking the life of every human in his trail. And at number 1 is Daken. Daken, or Akihiro, possesses a lot of the same abilities as his father, Wolverine. He has a crazy healing factor, superhuman senses, and of course, bone claws. But what some people may not be aware of is the one mutation he possesses that neither his father nor his sisters possess. That power would be pheromone control. Daken has empathic pherokinetic abilities that allow him to use his pheromones to manipulate the emotional state and sensory perceptions of others. He has used this to instill intense fear, happiness, depression, fascination, and a false sense of security in others. The false sense of security, though, is the definitely most interesting one, as it has allowed him to sneak up on others without them even worrying that he could be there, which is so cool. He has also used this ability to alter others' depth perception and vision, making them fight sluggishly. He can also control his own pheromones to make him basically untrackable, even to someone like Wolverine. Now, there are limits to Daken's pherokinesis, but it is such a cool ability.
Number 10, Jean Grey. Probably the most iconic mutant to have ever merged with the Phoenix Force and acted as its host would be, of course, Jean Grey. And there are many who would also consider her to be still one of the most unstoppable hosts for the cosmic entity pretty much of all time. This isn't even just because of feats she has accomplished while merged with the Phoenix Force, but because even without it, she is known as a force to be reckoned with. Or maybe not reckoned with. I mean, I know I wouldn't want to deal with that reckoning. I'm not messing with Jean. I don't think you should either. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you love it when I get to talk mutants, I love when I get to talk mutants, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. I know I'll be giving it a thumbs up because I get to talk about mutants. Woo! Number 9, Stepford Cuckoos. The Stepford Cuckoos are like Emma's children. Basically little Emma clones that were made with her own eggs, which were actually stolen from her when she was comatose. So genetically speaking, they are like Emma's offspring, but also were made almost exactly in her image, hence, you know, why we sometimes refer to them as clones. Kind of a little bit of both, really. Like Emma, they too have been considered by the Phoenix Force as potential preferred hosts. For a time, they were even chosen by the entity to act act as its hosts, with 3 out of the initial 5 who were still alive at the time becoming phoenixes, and the other 2 being resurrected kind of to an extent. Although the Stepford Cuckoos would not maintain their status as Phoenix Force hosts and struggle with both programming within them and the Phoenix Force basically vying for control over them from within, they would at least get to keep fragments of the Phoenix Force within themselves afterwards, trapped in their secondary mutation, their Diamond Hearts, which if you didn't know, the Stepford Cuckoos have Diamond Hearts. However, eventually even these Phoenix fragments within them would escape, so sad. No longer Phoenix at all. Number 8. Magik. Although Magik wasn't a host for the Phoenix Force for as long as some of the others have been that are on this list, she is still one of the most capable mutants in my mind to have been a host. Magik is Ilyana Rasputin, younger sister to Mikhail and Pyotr Rasputin. Her mutant power is known to be teleportation, but thanks to her ending up trapped in the limbo dimension for basically years, she is also pretty adept when it comes to experiences with demons and with magic. For a good long while, Magik was the ruler of limbo, and while in that realm possessed unlimited power, and even when outside of it, Magik was probably not someone that you would want to mess with. Even today, even with her not being the ruler of limbo, you don't want to mess with her. She not only is a mutant teleporter who is gifted in magic, but she is also an amazing fighter as well. The only reason that she even lost the Phoenix Force was because she was willing to take things further than her brother Colossus was at the time, who was also a host, for a piece of the Phoenix Force. This prompted a disagreement between brother and sister, with basically Spider-Man egging them on because it was to his advantage. Their fight escalated and resulted in them both losing their connection to the Phoenix Force, which was instead passed on to 2 of the other members of the once Phoenix 5, strengthening their connection to the Force. You know. Number 7. Namor, or Namor. Namor is simply one of the most powerful mutants around. Completely unstoppable in that almost every element of the character, in terms of power anyways, is considered to be close to, I would say, a 10 out of 10. Maybe even higher than that. Namor's pretty powerful. Namor is super strong, durable, can fly, can survive underwater, and is royalty, often having the full support of Atlantis, which he can pretty much call on at any time. He's smart, conniving, and ruthless, which makes him probably one of the most unstoppable mutants to have ever existed, even considering the fact that he is actually the first mutant to have ever existed at Marvel Comics. Fun fact. Namor didn't have the power of the Phoenix Force for long when he was part of the Phoenix 5, but what he lacks in length of time as a host, he definitely makes up for in raw, default power of a mutant, and also just as a character. Number 6. Emma Frost. Emma Frost is a mutant who we know as being super powerful just kind of by default, I would say. This isn't even so much because of what she is capable of with her powers, although that too is quite impressive, but because Emma is both a survivor and a thriver. She's just a powerful character. She is resourceful, smart, cunning, and hardworking. As a result, there isn't much that Emma can't do when she puts her mind to work. And I don't just mean psionically as a telepath either. Emma is an extremely successful teacher and businesswoman besides, which is all a testament to the strength of her sense of determination, and I think to an extent of her character. Emma ends up being one of the last mutants standing amidst the Phoenix 5 during Avengers vs. X-Men, and this isn't the only time that Emma would end up as a host for the Phoenix either. Emma had actually already ended up as the host for the entity prior to this event, albeit temporarily, although of course that time around she almost completely was corrupted by the sheer power of the Force, so there is that I guess to consider. Number 5. Kid Omega. Quentin Quire hasn't really had much time as the Phoenix Force because we've only really ever seen him actually become the Phoenix in an alternate future reality. But although we only got to see him briefly, his appearance did at least seem impressive there. In the alternate future of 13729, one of the realities dubbed as the Future X-Men, Quentin eventually grows up, has a son, and yes, fulfills his self-prophesied destiny in becoming the host of the Phoenix Force. Number 4. Cyclops. Cyclops isn't usually one of the first mutants that comes to my mind when I think like unstoppable or most unstoppable. I mean, Cyclops is unstoppable, but you know, he's not usually in my top 10 in my mind. But when it comes to his time as the Phoenix Force host during Avengers vs. X-Men, well, that's a rare incident where he actually does really stand out as an unstoppable character. This is not because of Cyclops' base abilities and power levels, which, you know, not to knock those, but it's actually because when he was in fact a host of the Phoenix, he ended up being the last one standing as a member of the Phoenix Five, even outlasting Emma Frost. And when his old mentor, Professor X, came to try and plead with Cyclops, basically free him from the Phoenix's influence, helping a whole cast of superpowered characters to defeat him, even that failed to actually stop Scott, which is pretty crazy. In fact, all they succeeded in doing there was basically pissing Scott off, which resulted in the Phoenix-infused Cyclops killing Charles in response. Number 3. Rachel Summers. Rachel Summers has the potential to be even more impressive than her own mother when it comes to her capabilities with the Phoenix Force. She is the alternate reality daughter of Jean Grey, aka Marvel Girl, and Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. And she's also kind of the daughter of the Phoenix, I think, because I think in the reality she hails from, 811, Jean and the Phoenix are like merged too, so she's also kind of literally the Phoenix's daughter. She might not be quite as untamed as Jean is, but in fact it is Rachel's more tempered sense of control as the Phoenix host that makes her so powerful. Rachel has been depicted as a more stable Phoenix host in comparison to Jean, and despite her own fiery persona, is a lot less likely to go off the rail and do something crazy like, you know, destroy a planet. Even though technically that wasn't even really Jean exactly who did that, but the Phoenix who had adopted Jean's consciousness and was in essence basically impersonating her. But either way, we sure do like to hold it over Jean's head anyways, so yeah, poor Jean. There's some characters in comics that I feel like we hold so many things over their head, and Jean is definitely one of those characters where I'm like, I feel like she's done enough. I feel like also it wasn't really even Jean technically. We can forgive her. Oh well. Number 2. Wolverine. If you're wondering when exactly this happened in the main continuity, I'm sorry to say that it did not happen in the main continuity. But it did happen in the reality of Earth 14412, where Logan became known as Old Man Phoenix. In this reality, humanity was completely wiped out, and even though Logan himself also somehow died, he returned to life later on as a chosen host for the Phoenix Force, which, you know, does make sense. That is what the Phoenix does. It loves to resurrect people, you know what I mean? He would also be the person to lend his powers to the alternate future version of Allfather Thor in this reality to help him in his fight against Doom. At this point in Doom's history in this alternate future, he had not only survived humanity being wiped out, but he also had acquired various different superhero-based powers and artifacts, which basically gave him a massive power boost. Fortunately, Thor, with a Phoenix Force boosted Mjolnir, was able to take on and defeat Doom. Of course, you know, Wolverine kind of had to give up his life to make that happen, but of course, it's the Phoenix Force, so afterwards Logan was just brought back, because that's how the Phoenix Force do. Number 1. Hope Summers. Definitely one of the most powerful Phoenix Force holders out there among mutants would have to be Hope Summers. Hope is just hands down one of the most powerful mutants around, period, and is basically nigh unstoppable, just like across the board. Well, I mean, you might be able to stop her if you have like a bunch of clones of Moira McTaggart at your disposal, which you can then use to build and explore a multitude of possibilities via the creation and destruction of alternate timelines. I digress. Most people don't have that anyways. Other than that, I would say that Hope is pretty unstoppable. She's so powerful that many writers tend to just completely leave her off the table, or make it so there is some reason that she can't really like be actively involved in the story. She's just a little too powerful. Case in point, when she was at the center of Avengers vs. X-Men, but basically was relegated to the background for most of that event, with the excuse of kind of like it basically being like for her own good or her protection. And yet even in that story, she was instrumental in solving the problem of actually what to do with the Phoenix Force, with the help of Scarlet Witch using it to bring back the mutants and then defeating the cosmic entity by in essence banishing it from existence, for a while at least. I will also add that I think one of the most insane feats you can accomplish with the Phoenix Force becoming one of its hosts is to basically merge with it and then even in the face of all that power, reject it, which is basically what Hope did, as her time as the Phoenix was like super short, but to me that's just like more unstoppable. Number 10. Gwenpool. Gwenpool is truly one of the most unstoppable mutants. In fact, she is so unstoppable that she actually was able to make herself a mutant by willing that origin into existence for herself. I know, it's wild. Gwenpool, for those who are unfamiliar, is an alternate version of Gwen Stacy and Deadpool combined, who hails from an alternate reality not yet given an official number. The temporary reality number assigned to it currently by fans is 565. Gwenpool becomes a mutant after Kamala Khan, the current Miss Marvel, refuses to fight her when Gwen tries to instigate a battle, and instead tries to reason with Gwen. Kamala is the one who suggests that Gwenpool's understanding of the fourth wall and her belief that she is simply a character existing in a comic book could be a story that Gwen created as a result of not wanting to acknowledge the truth. The fact that she is actually a reality warping mutant. possibly. The idea broke Gwen somewhat and caused her to retcon her own origins, instead becoming a reality warping mutant as Kamala had suggested and finding a home on Krakoa with all the other mutants of Earth 616. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and if you love it when we talk about mutants, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Rogue. Rogue is a mutant who truly is considered to be one of the most durable around. She can just take in a power set through absorbing someone's powers, permanently adopting it. In fact, some may not know, but that is actually how Rogue is able to fly and where she gets her strength and her durability from. She actually stole those powers from Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, aka formerly Miss Marvel, which is how she was known at the time. For a long time, Rogue was unable to properly control her powers, causing her to accidentally steal people's memories, powers, and even psyches just from touching them, and causing Rogue to often be much removed from her other fellow mutants, friends, and loved ones, afraid she might hurt them accidentally after she became a hero, and resulting in her basically wearing fully covering outfits, except for her face, of course. However, it was this very fear that apparently prevented Rogue from controlling her abilities, and once she faced it, she gained better control over her powers, making her virtually unstoppable, which is also probably why a lot of writers keep her on the sidelines, or prefer to. She's kinda hard to write because she is so unstoppable now. Number 8. Magneto. Pretty much nothing stops Magneto, not even losing his heart. Now, if you've seen our Unstoppable Superheroes list, then you know what I'm talking about. So for this point, I'm going to talk about another insane feat of Magneto's, other than when he defeated Uranos while completely heartless with some help from Storm. Not only can Magneto sustain his own flow of blood without a heart using his powers, but he could also seriously mess you up by manipulating your blood in your body. Or even worse, mess you up by just pulling out all of the iron from your blood. We've seen him do that too, and it was pretty horrifying, I gotta say. Magneto has also used his mastery of magnetism to perform the kind of blood witchcraft you'd associate more with a magic user, a warlock if we were talking D&D classes, I suppose. Magneto has used this ability to manipulate the blood of his victims to also control their minds, turning them into mindless zombies who will do his bidding as a result of manipulating the flow of blood to their brains. Who needs telepathy when you have magnetic mutant powers, I guess? Number 7. Apocalypse. I mean, there is a whole reality based around the idea of what if Apocalypse was unable to be stopped. This reality is known as Earth 295, aka the Age of Apocalypse. And in this world, Apocalypse becomes pretty much inevitable thanks to the early demise of one man, Charles Xavier, aka Professor X. AOA just goes to show you what a force Apocalypse is, and if you aren't convinced by an alternate reality where Apocalypse rules the world, you can also turn to a more recent X-Men event, Ten of Swords, aka the Otherworld Tournament. During this fight, Apocalypse faced his wife, who was possessed, and even against the seemingly unbeatable foe that was Annihilation, Apocalypse still managed to win, saving his wife and freeing her from the influence of the Golden Helm, while also basically saving all of Krakoa, mutant kind, and Otherworld, possibly the world itself, outside of Otherworld. Number 6. Jean Grey. You know how it goes. We have to talk about the most powerful original X-Men member if we're talking about Unstoppable Mutants. I just gotta do it. Jean Grey is a force to be reckoned with, and not just because she was the host for the Phoenix Force either. Even without the insane power of the Phoenix Force bonded to her, Jean has done some pretty impossible things, including almost single-handedly defeating Null during the Absolute Carnage event. And okay, yeah, so she didn't really single-handedly defeat Null one-on-one, but honestly, she probably could have if she really wanted to. She was, at the very least, integral to uncovering the God of Symbiote's weakness. Jean has been an unstoppable force many times over, and even while serving on the X-Men team recently, used her powers to single-handedly defeat Nightmare, who has managed to terrorize even Doctor Strange before, and she used her power to defeat Cordyceps Jones and his entire casino, simply by trapping him in an illusion while the X-Men basically did their thing. From within that illusion, Jean says it best when it comes to just how powerful she truly is in issue number 11 of the recent X-Men series. I was Marvel Girl, now I am Jean Grey. I did not even let the Phoenix command me, so what chance do you have? Ooh, fair. I would never try to command Jean Grey. I would only let Jean Grey command me.
Coming in at number 5 is M. just the letter M. Monet St. Croix has an interesting past, and honestly, her family is a big part of that. Her brother is an incredibly powerful bad dude who trapped her in a different form where she is known as Penance. As Penance, she has diamond skin, a telepathic resistance, and super sharp claws. M can even combine with her younger siblings Claudette and Nicole, but on her own, Monet is essentially a near perfect being. All of her physical and mental skills are greater than the natural physical limits of peak humans, granting her super strength, speed, agility, stamina, senses, intuition, and a genius level intellect, as well as reflexes that even allow her to catch bullets. She can fly at supersonic speeds by sheer force of will, she can read minds, project her thoughts into the minds of others, and defensively mask her mind against telepathic intrusion, and she has even displayed some telekinesis. And on top of all that, she has the power of being ridiculously good looking. Lucky. Number 4, Marius St. Croix. I could talk about Monet St. Croix for a long time, but her brother, he is just terrifying and needs to be discussed. Marius, who eventually goes by the name Emplate, has the ability to siphon mutant energy by feeding on the bone marrow of mutants using his super creepy feeder mouths that appear on the palms of his hands. Emplate needs the energy from mutants in order to survive, almost like a mutant vampire. And like a vampire, if Marius siphons all of a person's energy, his victims will pass away. Also like a vampire, if Emplate drains only part of a victim's energy, he can gain a kind of psychic control over their mind, and can cause the mutant to become an energy vampire just like him, but under his control. Kind of like a vampire's familiar. Interestingly, when feeding from a victim, he actually cancels out their powers and copies them for himself. After multiple feedings, he even gains their power permanently, like he did with Penance's diamond skin. And at number 3 is Chamber. Chamber, or Jonathan Evans Starsmore, discovered his powers when a blast of psionic energy burst from his torso, destroying much of his chest and his face. It turns out that Chamber is actually literally composed of that same psionic energy, and his body just acts as a shell for it. When his powers burst out of him, the wound was replaced by a constant glow of psionic fire, leaving him unable to speak. Instead, he can only communicate telepathically. Additionally, he does not eat, drink, or even breathe, as he has no organs. Chamber constantly created and unleashed psionic charges of energy that could strike with a volatile force, being projected as a blast from his chest, a series of guided streams that struck specific targets, or as a massive eruption striking in all directions. Now, if he was given the time to train properly, Chamber could have potentially been one of the most powerful mutants to walk the earth, but unfortunately he's not. Number 2, Mikhail Rasputin. As the older brother of both Colossus and Magic, Mikhail Rasputin has quite the mutant genealogy, and he ain't no chump himself. Mikhail is an alpha level mutant with the ability to manipulate subatomic matter and warp energy. His power hasn't really been properly defined, but he could forcibly fuse a man to a tree and could manipulate Bobby Drake, Iceman's body. Speaking of Iceman, Mikhail also seemed to display some form of enhanced perception, being able to see Bobby's potential just by looking at him, and he could show him how to use his powers in better ways. Mikhail has also used his power to fire energy blasts, tamper with people's powers, and most prominently for teleportation. He could transport himself as well as others by opening up dimensional portals by ripping away at the subatomic wall of space, which he did when the Soviets sent him into space and blew up his ship. Sorry. And coming in at number 1 is Sienna Blaze. Sienna Blaze has incredibly strong destructive abilities, thanks to the fact that Sienna can disrupt a planet's electromagnetic energy spectrum, absorbing the energy into her body and then releasing it, usually in destructive blasts. Sienna's released energy would tear a hole in the local electromagnetic field, which is bad, in case you wondered, with repeated use of her power theoretically being able to destroy the planet. She can also use the magnetic energy to fly at 150 miles per hour, or impressively to teleport herself along the planet's electromagnetic field. Again, every time she teleports, she permanently damages the electromagnetic field at the point of departure, causing a pretty strong explosion. As an example, Sienna shot down the X-Men's Blackbird in Antarctica. Sienna then ambushed Cyclops and Storm and nearly completely took them out out until Professor X prevented her from using her powers. Then Storm, Cyclops, and Professor X managed to defeat Sienna, except she just teleported away and left a massive explosion in her stead. Number 10, Emma Frost. She's probably the biggest name on this list. It almost feels like everyone knows her powers, but someone suggested her in the comments, and well, she's awesome. Emma Frost possesses telepathic abilities on a similar level to Charles Xavier. She's been referred to as an Omega-class telepath and has demonstrated the ability to stalemate Exodus and overcome telepaths such as Nate Gray and Rachel Summers through greater experience and skill. With her telepathy, Emma Frost can create psionic shields, telepathic cloaking, telepathic illusions. She can absorb information and upload information into others. Emma can project one's astral form from their body onto the astral planes or the physical planes. She can inhibit others' powers, induce pain, erase a person's memories, and heal mental trauma through psychic surgery. She has intuitive multilingualism, mind control, can create mental links, induce mental paralysis and sedation. She can alter others' minds, cause a kind of mental amnesia. She can telepathically detect and track others, not to mention produce psionic blasts and psionic lightning. And that's not mentioning her secondary mutation of a diamond form. This grants her super durability, strength, and stamina, as well as psychic immunity, but at the cost of her psychic powers. Number 9, Black Tom Cassidy. Black Tom Cassidy is the cousin of Sean Cassidy, who's Banshee, and he was originally a longtime crime partner to the villain Juggernaut, but his powers are interesting to say the least. Originally, his mutant power was bioorganic thermokinetic blasts, generating concussive blasts of force through any wooden medium. Normally, it was forgive my pronunciation, a shillilag, which is a traditional Irish wooden fighting stick. Tell me if I messed it up in the comments, please. After a fight with Cable, doctors grafted a wood-like substance onto his wounds, healing him and allowing him to channel his bioblast directly through his fists. But as a result of a genetic virus, the substance spread over Tom's whole body, turning him into a Groot-like looking dude, which actually worked to his benefit as the secondary mutation gave him plant growth, allowing him to grow to immense size, superhuman strength, a healing factor, chlorokinesis, which is control over plant life within his vicinity. He could distribute his consciousness among plants he controlled, and Cassidy could drain the life force of organic beings. He eventually returned to a human form, but kept the capacity to control plants to a limited degree, mainly focusing his powers on wood specifically, and using the energy channeling aspect of his powers, he could increase his striking power to generate protective shielding. Number 8, Sebastian Shaw. Sebastian Shaw is a mutant that you'll probably best recognize for being the Black King of the Hellfire Club, or the guy who somehow took out Darwin in the X-Men First Class movie. I still think that was dumb. His powers are actually a bit different from that movie though. Shaw has the ability to absorb energy, specifically all forms of kinetic energy directed at him, and use it to enhance his strength, speed, and stamina. This includes physical damage such as that sustained in battle, and kinetic blasts such as Cyclops' optic blast or Gambit's explosions. That's why you'll sometimes see him punching walls, being hit by his own underlings, or allowing himself to be hit by his foes in order to build up more and more of the kinetic energy to empower himself. He can also absorb and use other forms of energy such as electricity and magical energy, as shown in Avengers Academy when fighting Hercules. He can build up and store this energy and release it whenever he chooses. His biggest power, however, comes in the form of being such a powerful and influential figure in the Hellfire Club. Number 7, Jason Wingard. Jason Wingard, otherwise known as Mastermind, is basically an illusionist, but a very, very powerful one. He can psionically manipulate the senses of other people, causing them to see, hear, touch, smell, and or taste things which do not actually exist, or see, hear, touch, smell, and or taste real things in ways that they would not do naturally. So, for example, he can seem to make a solid wall appear in an empty space, or he can make himself look and sound like a different person, or look and feel like a wall, or even seem invisible. Since his power only affects the mind, his illusions cannot be recorded with cameras or anything like that, but his power is so strong that even if his victims know they are being subjected to an illusion, they will still react to the illusion as if it were reality, unless they can rid themselves of all suspicion that it is indeed reality, which sounds a little confusing. Basically, if Mastermind creates the illusion of a wall, most people, even if they know it's an illusion, will still be unable to walk through that wall. His most famous usage of his power, in my opinion, is when he attempted to manipulate Jean Grey, which led to that whole Dark Phoenix thing. Good job, dude. Number 6. Sunspot. Roberto da Costa is another mutant that a lot of people have heard of, especially in the more recent stories that have been coming out of Marvel. But that doesn't mean everyone knows his powers. Bobby da Costa's mutant ability allows him to store solar energy in his cells through a similar method to the way we store energy when we eat food. He can then release it when necessary to enhance his physical strength, usually with the side effect of his body being cloaked in darkness because he drains all the ambient light from his skin, which sounds really cool. The enhancements to his strength through this radiation have allowed him to knock down an alternate universe Hulk, even drawing blood and even restraining Gladiator of the Shi'ar. But other than his physical enhancements, he has also used the energy he absorbs to fly faster than light speed, use pyro and thermokinesis, firing blasts of heat and dark solar plasma, as well as using photokinesis directing light. He's also incredibly tricksy, displayed when he recently manipulated Iska the Unbeaten. I just love this character. Number 5. Trevor Fitzroy. Trevor here, who goes just by Fitzroy, is actually from Earth 1191. There, he was the illegitimate son of Anthony Shaw, the Black King of the Hellfire Club. Trevor's mutant ability was to drain other living beings of their life force, converting it into energy and absorbing it into himself, usually disintegrating his victims. With this life force, he can do a few different things, like opening temporal wormholes to travel across time and space, teleportation, shifting objects into different time frames, altering the flow of time to return people or objects to a previous incarnation, and freezing people in a type of stasis. The thing is, the usage of his power depends on the life force he absorbs. So for example, one wormhole would be equivalent to one person's life force. It's a little scary, to be honest. He did get a big power boost in the Bishop the Last X-Men series, where he tries to become time itself. He is a super cool and super dangerous character. Definitely check him out. Number 4. Harold Leland. Harold Leland was an alcoholic and obese corporate lawyer and also a mutant with the abilities to increase the mass or gravity of a person or object within his line of sight. He can use this ability to increase mass all at once or over time, slowly increasing the more a victim struggles. The power has shown to even break the ground beneath a target depending on the strength of that ground. So for example, there was a time that he sent Wolverine from inside the Hellfire Club all the way through the floor and the ground into the sewers. Also, the human targets would suffer great strain in their muscles, particularly in the heart, with the possibility of suffering physical damage. And if Leland uses his power on an item, that item could crumble if it wasn't particularly durable. Leland joined the Hellfire Club, an elite social club for the rich and wealthy located in New York's 5th Avenue, under Sebastian Shaw. He isn't the most impressive fighter, but his ability has come in handy more than a few times. Number 3. Emma Steed. Emma Steed is actually the Black Queen of the London Hellfire Club. If you are noticing a lot of Hellfire Club members here, that's because there are a lot with very cool powers and not a lot of people know much about them at all. For example, Emma Steed here has a rare form of telepathic power called psionic skinning. This basically allows Emma to create blades of pure psionic energy to attack and disable her foes. These blades aren't purely for physical attack. They actually allow her to do a number of things like warping the minds of people, igniting pain sensors, destroying physical portions of their brain, and destroying psionic forms or astral projections. Using this ability, she was able to de-life the Shadow King, who is an incredibly powerful telepath. As a secondary result of her powers, she is basically immune to any type of psionic or telepathic attack, with her presence being absolutely destructive to telepaths. Number 2. Cora of the Burning Heart. Can we just get an applause for literally the coolest name ever? Like, Cora of the Burning Heart. That's awesome. Cora of the Burning Heart is a mutant from Morocco where she served as an assassin and primarily used her power only to boost her own abilities in battle, thanks to the Iraqi being really stubborn, honor-bound fighters. But Cora's abilities can indeed help others as well. Cora's heart is an internalized combustion furnace, which generates life force energy. Thanks to that energy, she gets this really awesome looking flaming skeletal appearance, and she uses this constant energy source to give herself incredible incredible physical capabilities, as well as boost up the powers of others around her to even greater heights. She was a member of the X-Terminators alongside Cable, and she is also a part of SWORD. Also, Cora of the Burning Heart. Sorry, just wanted to say it again. Super cool. Number 1. Amelia Vaught. Amelia was a mutant born with the ability to transubstantiate solid matter into vapor that she can control, and honestly, it's such a great ability. Seeing the things she can do with this ability is really cool. I said she can transubstantiate matter, and that is including herself and other people. When she turns herself into vapor, she is obviously unharmed by physical attacks, but can then fly through the air as vapor and pass through small holes or cracks. But the vapor is still physically there, which means she can still move objects as vapor. She has also turned her allies into vapor to get them out of dangerous situations, substantiating them beside her. And she's even stolen weapons off of enemies, turning them into vapor, which she then reformed in her own hands. But wait, there's more. Using the astral plane, Amelia is able to transport herself and anything else across the surface of the globe in an instant, even summoning distant people to herself by teleportation, converting them into mist and then bringing that mist into her presence to be reformed. It's just super cool. Number 10. Vanisher. Vanisher actually has the mutant ability of teleportation, but unlike mutants like Nightcrawler, Vanish's teleporting ability is completely psionic in nature and actually causes him to go through a series of extra-dimensional portals. But he does it so quickly he didn't even realize that was what he was doing. There is actually an instant where he tries to explore his powers more and stops his teleportation partway through, ending up trapped in the Dark Force dimension by its inhabitants. Vanish can also use his ability to bring a certain amount of mass other than himself with him when he teleports, which in one case allowed him to teleport himself and about 8 others from Southern California to Genosha. To add to that, Vanisher can actually also teleport any part of his body, kind of like how the Spot did it, but he does it so little that it's almost kinda not worth mentioning. Number 9. Tag. Brian Cruz, the mutant known as Tag, has the awesome ability called the Pariah Effect. Now this ability allows Brian to psionically tag a target, causing that person to emit a psionic signal that could make everyone, or even a select group of people in an area, either run away from or run towards and dogpile on top of the selected target, or who he likes to call it. The distance of this game of tag was about 100 feet, and everyone affected by the ability, excluding the one tagged, was fully aware of what they were doing while not being able to control their own actions. It's such an interesting ability, and it's fun as well because he can also tag a target with the effect of having that person run away from themselves, so they would just be uncontrollably running until he cancelled the effect. He was part of the group called the Helians until he lost his power on M-Day and passed away in a missile attack shortly afterwards. But luckily, Tag was resurrected on Krakoa, and hopefully we will get to see him use his abilities again at some point. Number 8. Hijack. Marvel's mutant David Bond actually has absolutely nothing to do with British 007s. Instead, David is the mutant known as Hijack with the technopathic ability to assume control over vehicles. It's kind of so oddly specific, and it makes me wonder if the ability works for things like bicycles or like scooters or something. This power gives me more questions than answers, to be perfectly honest. Look, he's controlled buses to ram into Sentinels, and he's even been able to control an entire SHIELD helicarrier, and even a fleet of them at one point, which is definitely no small feat of its own. His abilities have even allowed David to control technological suits of armor, but curiously he couldn't control Sentinels. Now, while his power could be used in quite a lot of different ways, David wasn't always the most useful of characters, so we didn't get a whole ton of him to analyze. Number 7. Manifold. Originally, Manifold was thought to be a teleporter, but his powers are much more than just teleportation. Eden actually has the ability to communicate with the universe and kind of ask it for certain things, and in turn the universe would change and mold to do what he wanted. So for teleportation, for example, he's actually kind of creating the Einstein-Rosen bridge and folding space to allow himself, or whatever he wants, to be teleported from wherever he is to wherever he wants. It's the same thing when he creates portals. He's used the ability to fold space around him to make him appear invisible, and he can even fold space around beings and things, like when he teleported a bit of the sun's plasma to his hand and folded space around it so it wouldn't be able to hurt him, which is a crazy thought. Even though this ability only works in his native reality, it seems like potentially an incredibly powerful ability. Number 6. La Bandera. First appearing in Wolverine Volume 2 number 19 in the December of 1989, La Bandera is said to be the daughter of a supporter of Fidel Castro, and her mutant ability is basically to be an awesome leader, which in turn apparently powers her secondary mutation. So her first mutation is as an empath, able to influence the emotions of others, which she mainly used to inspire people to fight against oppression. And then in turn, the amount of followers she had would power her energy projection powers, which she would channel through her staff. So if she has no followers, then there's no energy projection. But if she's using her empath abilities properly, then she should always have followers, right? She began fighting dealers, who she followed to the South American country of Tierra Verde, which at that point was ruled by a harsh and corrupt dictator. She teamed up with Wolverine to fight the dictator, but unfortunately she passed away at the hands of Zeitgeist in 1995 and hasn't really been talked about since, like, at all. Number 5. Blindfold. It's interesting that Blindfold wears a blindfold, as she was born with no eyes or eye sockets for her to blind with a fold. But don't think being unable to see is some kind of handicap. Blindfold is wildly powerful. Blindfold's powers are psychically based and are strongest in telepathy and wielding astral energy, which she can make solid to do a number of things, including creating armor, weapons, force fields, and energy blasts, and using it to cast her astral projections into the physical world. Using her telepathy, sometimes in conjunction with the astral plane and its energies, Ruth is capable of astral travel, psychometry, precognition, retrocognition, clairvoyance, psychic possession, mental influence, and she even has some chaos manipulation. She also has a degree of telepathic resistance, meaning telepaths can't read her mind, but they can still possibly attack it and possess it and all that fun stuff. And in at number 4 is Destiny. After talking about Ruth, it seems like a logical shift to talk about her possible great-grandmother, Irene Adler. Irene Adler, otherwise known as Destiny as a mutant, has a long history going all the way back to the 19th century, and she was even in a relationship with Mystique all the way back when. While she has her eyes, unlike Blindfold, Irene is indeed physically blind. But it's okay, as she could still see the future. That's because Destiny has the mutant power of precognition, able to mentally scan the probability spectrum of alternate futures, and by concentrating, she could focus on only the most probable alternate futures. She could scan the alternate futures that existed from 1 second away up until those that existed 15 minutes away, but she could be 97% accurate if her predictions were 10 seconds away or less, allowing her to basically see what she was doing even though she couldn't see what she was doing. Number 3. Exodus. This character is one a lot of you may actually know is pretty powerful, as he does have a seat on the Krakoan Quiet Council and is insanely capable. Exodus actually began as Grand Duke Benet du Paris in the 12th century as a nobleman hailing from the medieval France. He was sent to fight in the Crusades in the Holy Lands, and on his journey out there, that's when his mutant powers awoke. And he even gained further enhancements from the mutant apocalypse, becoming one of his champions before being entombed until the modern era when Magneto awoke him and teamed up with him. He is one of the most powerful mutants alive. He is an Omega level psionic, using the abilities of telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, and empathy. His level of telekinesis is so fine-tuned that he can even use it to manipulate things on the molecular and subatomic scales, allowing him to disassemble or reassemble complex devices, explosively even, and he's even been able to do this gaining control over electrons in an atom. He can create force fields, concussive blasts, electromagnetic blasts, and fly at speeds of around Mach 2. But he further uses his telekinesis to enhance his strength, speed, and reflexes to an impressive degree, as well as using his abilities to heal himself and others, resurrecting and fixing the atoms that make up our bodies. And that's all alongside his other abilities, including enhanced durability, longevity, healing factor, and a psionic vampirism. Number 2. Cosmar. When Tashi Rapina first showed up in 2020, her mutant powers caused a little bit of a problem. Tashi has Waneric reality warping, essentially meaning her dreams branch out and affect the reality around her, trapping her and whoever is around in the dreams. Now, people trapped in there can be physically or telepathically affected by these abilities. So, for example, when she was having a nightmare, some guards discovered her and were turned into monsters by her abilities, but it only added to the fuel of her nightmare, making things a lot more worse. nightmares. Her abilities can also show others their dreams or fears. It took Wildside using their abilities to make Tashi's nightmares into a pleasant dream to free those who had been trapped inside. It's a bonkers power, and its emergence affected her physically too, which led her on a mission to try and find a way to look more human again. But her ability is definitely one of the more unique ones I've seen, with those who become trapped in her dreams being connected in one neural network with Tashi and used as a power source. Number 1. Danny Moonstar. Okay, a bunch of you guys mentioned Danny Moonstar in the comments of the last part, as there was a mutant that had a similar shtick. But Danny's powers are much more advanced than those of Beltane. While Beltane can create illusions of people's fears, Danny's powers only started here. But now she can create three-dimensional images of certain visual concepts from thoughts and emotional impressions within the minds of either herself or others. It used to be just fears, but then it moved on to deepest desires, and then as she grew, so too did her power to allow her to create images from thoughts and less intense emotions. So, as an example, as this actually happened, say Danny and Cannonball walk into a high-class hotel dressed casually. So to blend in, Danny used the image of what a well-dressed hotel guest would look like from the mind of the desk clerk and disguise both herself and her teammate in those images. She could do this with multiple people at once as well, creating illusions that were almost real to the person whom they belonged. But with a little help from Professor X, she was able to create an image that was physically tangible. That's her potential, but so far it's only happened the one time. Normally her power is used more as a psychological tool or trick, but it's not her only thing. Having powers that are psionic in nature, she can actually focus her powers into energy arrows, which can stun someone by disrupting their central nervous system or force them to relive a traumatic memory. And as she grew, these arrows became more capable of physical harm. Moving on to number 10 with Marrow. Of all the mutant powers out there, I think the one I would actively try to avoid having, if that was how it works, is the abilities of Marrow. Now Marrow's actual mutant ability is a hyper-accelerated metabolism, and it's through this that she's able to do what most people know her for: accelerated bone growth. She has the ability to control the growth, shape, and toughness of her bone structure, even having it protrude from her body and be used as weapons that she can remove. She can also use this ability to create a sort of armor. Now the only problem, and the reason I wouldn't want it, is that it hurts when she does it, and just imagine how much that would hurt, having your bones protrude from your body. No thank you, I'll pass. Luckily, she has a very rapid healing factor that also gives her enhanced strength, agility, and reflexes, and as a little bonus, this girl has 2 hearts, which allowed her to actually survive when she had one pulled out. Nice. Number 9, Eunice the Untouchable. Now, I gotta say the force field abilities of wrestler, criminal, and villain Eunice the Untouchable definitely have some major drawbacks. The positives are great. His force field can withstand blows from the Incredible Hulk. He can project his force field to move objects. He could also use the shield to be untouchable, hence the name, opening it up to be able to grab things and eat. Now, the drawback would come in the fact that there have been multiple times where Eunice had his abilities increased, but to a point he couldn't even control his own abilities. At this time, his shield would literally close him off from everything. He couldn't grab things, eat food, or even breathe oxygen, which caused him to even pass out on one occasion, which luckily deactivated his powers, allowing him to actually live. Maybe if he used his powers for good, the writers would make him less self-destructive, but these are the cards you're dealt, bro. Guys, if you are indeed enjoying this video, do make sure to give it a little thumbs up. It's all you gotta do to let us know that you're enjoying what you're seeing. Thanks, nerds. Appreciate you. And at number 8 is Pyro. St. John Allardyce is an Australian pyrokinetic mutant. He has the ability to control flame to grow in size and intensity, and to even take on any form he desires. He has used flame to create almost solid creations he refers to as, quote, the living flame, which have been in the shape of gigantic claws, birds, or even golems. The size, power, and intensity of the fire beings Pyro created were limited only by the extent of his imagination, the degree of his concentration, and his force of will. The only problem for Pyro is that he cannot generate flames spontaneously. He needs a source, which has been flamethrowers in his costume, other allies like Lockheed, or like a lighter or something. He could also be burnt by any fire that wasn't under his direct control. Now, he used his abilities mainly for evil deeds and crimes, but since his resurrection on Krakoa after he died due to the legacy virus, he has gone on to join Kate Pryde's Marauders and got this crazy skull tattoo on his face. It's kind of cool, but also I wouldn't do it, but you know, whatever. Number 7, Strife. You know, a lot of the characters on these lists have come into contact with the character of Strife, And while most people do know how powerful Strife is, I think not including him on this far into this series is kind of a sin. So, Strife is actually a clone, created by Mother Ascani and taken by Apocalypse, a clone of Nathan Summers, whom most of you know as Cable. Strife is essentially what Cable could have been had he not been infected by the techno-organic virus that he needs to use his powers to constantly keep at bay. Without that limitation, just like Cable, Strife is an Omega level telekinetic, at least that's what he calls himself. And it's stated that he is the third most powerful one on Earth. He is able to do almost all of the other things telepaths of his level are capable of, plus powerful defensive and offensive telekinetic powers. But he is also cybernetically enhanced to have superhuman physical attributes thanks to Apocalypse. Strife is an incredibly powerful villain, not to be taken lightly at all. And at number 6 is Reaper. Pantu Hurageb has some interesting abilities to say the least. When he first appeared as part of Strife's Mutant Liberation Front, Reaper had the ability to generate a paralyzing effect on others that slowed their mobility and reaction times. He would usually use his scythe as a conduit for this ability, and it could even fully paralyze victims. But later, Reaper was enhanced by the Weapon X program, who gave him cybernetic prosthetic arms that could take different shapes, although you likely won't be surprised to hear they usually took the form of scythes that would still act as a conduit for his abilities. Unfortunately, Reaper did lose his abilities on M-Day, only to regain them again and then have them drained again. So he doesn't have any powers right now, I'm pretty sure. Or they're like diluted or something, I don't know. Number 5, Dragoness. For Tamara Kurtz, she was born a mutant directly because of the nuclear fallout caused by Hiroshima that her parents were exposed to, which is a different reason than a lot of other mutants, which to me makes her more interesting. She only debuted in 1990, so she's only been around for about 30 years, but she has certainly established herself as a powerful mutant so far, displaying the ability of bioelectricity generation, kind of like an eel. No, I'm just kidding. She's not like an eel. She usually uses this electricity in electrical blasts and pyrotechnic flares, which she used as part of Strife's Mutant Liberation Front. Since her introduction, she has also been seen as a vampire, after which she died and has since been revived, so she may or may not still be a vampire as well. I have no idea. Also, for a while she was equipped with these biotechnic pair of wings, which in the House of M were actually completely organic. I'd be stoked to see her show up again in comics and maybe expanded upon. I don't feel like there are many electricity-based mutants, so it'd be kinda cool. Number 4, Slab. A lot of you liked seeing Thumbelina in part 7 of this list, but what about her brother? Chris Anderson was a member of Mr. Sinister's Nasty Boys, and his life before this time isn't very well known. He has abilities similar to his sister. Where she can decrease in size, Slab has been shown to increase in size, getting stronger and more durable as he does so. Later on, he joined the Mutant Liberation Front, and even more recently than that, he has been seen on the Mutant Nation of Krakoa, where he went on to join up with Sword as part of their security division. Number 3, Vincente. He isn't really the most impressive of characters, although his abilities are certainly interesting, even if he usually gets defeated. On Earth 616, Vincente was a member of M-Plate's Hellions team. He had the ability to change his body from solid, liquid, or gas forms. Now, as a gas or liquid, he has been shown to be able to mix himself in with other materials and substances. So, for example, he once mixed himself in with some soup. Or, in the Age of Apocalypse world, he became wine inside a bottle. Over time, he further developed his abilities so that in his gas form, he could now render himself poisonous if inhaled. He was defeated twice, and since the last defeat, he hasn't really appeared more. Not yet at least, so let's cross our fingers and hope he shows up. Number 2, Skids. Sally Blevins, otherwise known as Skids, has a long history in Marvel Comics, being involved with many other mutant characters and teams from Magneto and Charles Xavier to the Morlocks and Terminators. First introduced in X-Factor number 7 in August 1986, Skid's mutant ability is to create frictionless force fields that protect her from pretty much all physical attacks, falls, energy weapons, and projections. It can also allow her to kind of skate at a bit of speed given the frictionless nature of these force fields. She can also use her force fields to extend to others if she focuses. There was one really cool moment when she protected Avalon from breaking up upon re-entry to the Earth's atmosphere with help from Jean Grey. That was really cool. So if you ever check that out, check it out. That made no sense. Whatever. Let's move on. Number 1, Wind Dancer. Sophia Mantiga was increasingly isolated at a young age, being ignored by her father, Walter Barrett. after the death of her mother and being told to not use her powers. Now Sophia finally reached a breaking point. She entered into one of her father's grocery stores and let loose a hurricane inside of it. After she was arrested by police, Mr. Barrett was confronted by Danielle Moonstar, who saw Sophia on the news. She persuaded him to enroll Sophia into the Xavier Institute. Sophia Mantiga has aerokinesis that she uses to amplify small vibrations in the air and draw far-off sounds to her ears. She can also disrupt the equilibrium of others with compressed air, lift herself off the ground for flight, create sharp forces of wind that can cut through material, and she even creates isolated whirlwinds or direct blasts of high-pressure air control. And she can manipulate the movement of air, but this is all before she was depowered. She has been a part of the Marauders, X Corporation, New Warriors, and New Mutants squad. Coming in right at number 10 is Richter. Julio Richter has a pretty interesting mutant power. Richter can manipulate various aspects of the planet itself. Originally, his powers manifested in simple seismic energy, allowing him to create earthquakes, shock waves, and rudimentary transport of Earth matter. However, after Richter's powers evolved, he now has the ability to remotely terraform the ground around him in a much more precise manner. He can toss rocks around with precision or will the ground to open up like a tunnel. But he also has some skill with plants, controlling vines and other plants to ensnare his opponents. Julio also gained magma kinesis after being trapped under an active volcano and just rising out of it, riding on top of the magma like an absolute badass. More impressive than that though is that Richter's powers have created a psychic / empathic bond between himself and the primal life force of Earth's biosphere, allowing him some clairvoyance and mysticism. Definitely one of the coolest characters I have never heard of. I just wanted to pause here to say if you're enjoying this list so far, dropping a like is all you have to do to help us out and let us know that this is what you want to see. And on that note, we're gonna get to number 9, who is Gorgeous George. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and when I behold George Blair, gorgeous is not the word that comes to mind, but nonetheless that is the name he holds. Gorgeous George's body is composed of this tar or putty-like stuff that, through his thoughts, can be expanded, morphed, and reshaped in any way he wants. Using this ability, he has been able to turn his entire body into a puddle or make himself extremely slippery to avoid capture. Side note, becoming extra slippery just makes me like ick, you know? I don't like that slipperiness. George is also very hard to injure. He can reconstitute parts of his body and can even bend to dodge attacks. The slippery thing also kind of helps with this as well. He has also once tried to choke Strong Guy by using his powers to enter his lungs, which is just a terrifying thought. On a lighter note though, his arms are actually longer than normal because he forgot their normal length after getting drunk with other members of Mr. Sinister's Nasty Boys. Well, that's kinda cool. Number 8, Thumbelina. Are you getting tired of seeing all these super powered beings who look like they just walked off a runway? Well, lucky for you, there is Christina Anderson, who goes by the moniker of Thumbelina. She's short, she's stout, she's slow, and she's always being made fun of. But she has a pretty useful mutant ability. Thumbelina can shrink down to 1/4 of an inch, making her an excellent candidate for missions of espionage with the Mutant Liberation Front. The best part about Thumbelina's powers though is that she retains her full-size strength in her miniature size and has even been shown to actually increase in strength as she shrinks. So make fun of her all you want, but Thumbelina has proved instrumental to the Mutant Liberation Front team, even being the reason their first mission was such a success. Number 7 is Strong Guy. I kinda can't believe I haven't talked about Guido Carosella yet. Despite this guy's massive hulking appearance, he is one of the most entertaining mutants around. Essentially, Guido, who goes by the name Strong Guy, has the ability to absorb kinetic energy and use it to enhance his physical strength. Now at a base level, he can lift around 50 tons, which is already more than a lot of superpowered beings. But using his kinetic absorption, he can boost that strength up to far above 100 tons, making him one of the strongest characters in Marvel Comics. Unfortunately, Guido's body suffers from his mutation. Storing the kinetic energy he absorbs for more than 90 seconds will permanently distort his body in very painful ways. The distortions he's already suffering from cause him to be in constant pain, which, being the great guy he is, pushed him towards being absolutely hilarious to hide his pain. Hey y'all, if you love the manga, if you love the anime, well then make sure to check out Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. James is an awesome host bringing you videos just like this one, but with that manga and anime setting. You should definitely check it out. And coming off of that, number 6 is Layla Miller. Of all the mutant powers I've come across, resurrection is one that doesn't actually happen too often. But Layla's resurrection ability is an interesting one. It comes with a major side note. Layla has the ability to resurrect dead beings, restoring their bodies and their consciousness, but not their soul. Without their soul, the resurrected being will have no conscience or morality. We saw this happen both with Strong Guy and Trevor Fitzroy, who were resurrected by Layla, who eventually experienced drastic changes in their personality without their souls. Another key factor about this resurrection is that it can only be performed within minutes of the individual's death. Layla claims she can also reverse this process, taking back the life that she gives. Another interesting note for Layla is that during the House of M, Layla was resistant to Wanda's reality warping abilities and retained all of her memories. She could even give others back their memories. She's also been to the future and studied magic with Dr. Doom, so like, that's cool as well. Coming in at number 5 is Shatterstar. So I was like this close to including Longshot on this list, but he doesn't even consider himself a mutant, and there's a whole bunch of weird time mojo verse stuff going on, so instead I'm going to do his father and or son, which is a whole other thing in itself. Look, all you need to know is we're talking about Shatterstar. Gavidra 7 learned the arts of battle as a warrior in arenas on Mojo World, where he developed both a sense of honor and incredible fighting skill, but those aren't his abilities. He possesses a large superhero starter pack. Superhuman strength, speed, agility, stamina, durability, senses, reflexes, agility, dexterity, coordination, balance, plus a regenerative healing factor and even enhanced learning ability. Curiously though, he actually has hollow bones, which makes him a shim lighter than you would think he is, but also further boosts up his natural physical skills. The cool part of Shatterstar though are his Mojoverse swords, which he can use through his mutant ability to channel powerful vibratory shockwaves, which can be absolutely devastating but also kind of drains him of energy. But after his Mojo time, he can now create X-shaped portals as well that have to be linked to another person who acts as an anchor for said portals. These also drain him of energy, and he has a cooldown of about like 4 days before he can do it again, because this powerhouse needs some kind of balancing. Number 4, Aurora. In the last part of this series, we talked about Northstar, but that mutant has a sister. And guess what? Surprisingly, the mutant gene runs in the family. That shouldn't be surprising really, because genes and all that. Wow, this is a horrible intro. Janine Marie Beaubier, otherwise known as Aurora, can generate a bright light, which according to the wiki is equivalent to 500,000 foot candles. Or if you aren't weird, it's about as strong as a lighthouse light, which is also an extremely weird frame of reference, but I digress. She and her brother can both do this by varying the rate of acceleration of the molecules of their bodies out of phase with one another, thereby generating a cascade of photonic discharges. The light can actually do some interesting things, like she can make a calming light that can even interrupt psychic control, or she can make concussive light blasts. Or, which is even cooler, she can even create lightning blasts that actually do some considerable damage. Like her brother, she can also move incredibly fast, and thanks to her molecular manipulation, she can also be extremely durable, heal quickly, and even withstand all the g-force of moving so fast without doing those insane weird breathing exercises that pilots have to do. Number 3, Phantom X. I honestly kinda dread talking about Phantom X, but I also completely love this guy. When I first read a comic with him in it, I did not fully understand his power, and I still don't really, so now I'm gonna try and explain something to you that I do not fully understand myself. Cool? Cool. So basically, Phantom X, or Charlie Cluster 7, or Weapon 13, or Jean-Philippe if that's what you want to call him, was experimented on by Weapon Plus and was genetically grown and evolved using Sentinel technology. Thanks to this, he actually has, or had, 3 brains for independent parallel processing, nanoactive blood, and his primary nervous system is actually a detachable techno-organism called EVA, or EVA. So there's some stuff to unpack there. EVA, or EVA, can fly herself and can generate bioelectric charges to be used as weapons, with Phantom X being both telepathically and symbiotically linked to EVA. His multiple brains allow him to think like a sort of supercomputer similar to Sage, but it also gives him access to 2 extra personalities, a charmer and a super deadly mutant hunter. He can create extremely powerful illusions and can enter a trance state where he can rapidly heal, and his self-supremacy over his body and mind allows him to overcome pretty much anything to complete his mission, including mind control. I can't talk too much more about him without taking forever, but know that he has enhanced senses, is a dope fighter, and does not create any kind of smell. Please look into this character and try to make sense of him, because I need help. Number 2. Somnus. Carl Valentino is actually a new member of Earth's Mutants, first appearing in Marvel's Voices Pride #1 in June 2021. But canonically, he's been around for a while. He and Daken actually had a one-night stand in 1967, a one-night stand in which Daken dreamt of them having an entire life together, which caused Daken to retrieve Carl's body in the modern day and bring it to Krakoa for revival. Except this dream was caused by Carl himself. That's because Somnus has the mutant power of Wannaromancy, which I'm almost certain I mispronounced, but I'm kind of proud of myself that I think I didn't. This means he has the ability to enter, broadcast, and even control dreams at will. He can render his opponents unconscious and is also able to bring others into his dreamscape. It's such a unique and interesting power, and it can allow him to live entire lifetimes within a dream, which in my nerd mind tells me he can learn and improve upon skills while dreaming, but don't take my word on that, I just kinda made that up. Only time will tell the multitude of ways his power shall be used in the future. And finally, at number 1 is WizKid. A computer genius and novice inventor, Takashi Taki Matsuya kind of has an unfair advantage in the inventor game. That's because WizKid here has the ability to technoform materials and rearrange parts of things to function to his specifications, even to the point of being contrary to the laws of nature and science. And he's even recently learned how to manipulate plants and even other mutant powers to create new technology. With this ability comes a natural psionic aptitude for seeing how components can work together, which lets him make things work even better using his mutant power. As for the using of other mutant abilities, it basically means he can see the use of individual mutant powers as components, coming together as a larger machine, or even being able to guide the linking and combination of mutant powers to work collaboratively together. So he's almost like a power strategist, which is really cool, on top of the awesome technology he can already create. All this basically comes together to make WizKid someone you would absolutely want on your side, wheelchair and all. At number 10 is Bishop. Lucas Bishop is a mutant from the far-flung dystopian possible future where Hope Summers wiped out millions of human beings, resulting in the hunting and policing of mutants by Sentinels under control of the government. From just this alone, his knowledge of possible future events, he has a large amount to offer. But Lucas Bishop also served as a member of the XSE mutant police force, giving him a whole whack of experience using his abilities. Speaking of which, Bishop has the very useful mutant ability of energy absorption, allowing him to absorb the majority of types of energy, including magic, sound, light, psionic, psychic, and the list goes on and on, with no clearly defined limit as of yet. The energies he absorbs can be either environmental or directed towards him as attacks. He can then store or project that energy from his body in different ways, whether in the form of concussive blasts, energy rays, explosions, fire, plasma, and again the list goes on and on. But his favorite use is by projecting the energy out of his XSE weaponry. The nature of his powers makes it difficult to damage him with energy-based attacks, and almost any attack to be honest, giving him nigh invulnerability. But it also enables him to work well with any energy-using teammates. Bishop can also store the absorbed energy within his personal reserves, whereupon the energy increases his strength, speed, stamina, and healing abilities. He is highly underutilized, especially recently, and I think think that's gotta change. Alright, at number 9 is Polaris. Lorna Dane is not just a green Scarlet Witch, okay? In fact, she is the real, legit daughter of the anti-hero magnetic powerhouse Magneto. She's been manipulated, used, and been the victim of villains like Mesmero, Eric the Red, the Marauders, Zaladane, and Apocalypse. But she has been a member of the X-Men and more recently is a key member of the newest version of the team. She's always been prominent, but I think a little overlooked in comparison to others, which is a shame. She's actually quite powerful. As the daughter of Magneto, Polaris actually has pretty much exactly the same abilities as him. She can control and manipulate magnetic fields, allowing her to create force fields, fly on the Earth's magnetic field, emit magnetic concussive pulses that can overload and short-circuit electrical systems. She's able to manipulate the natural iron within the blood of living organisms, allowing her to reverse the flow of an entire crowd's blood in order to render them unconscious. She controls metal and magnetism just like her father, but hasn't had as much experience, so her potential has not been fully realized as of yet. Number 8. Forge. Forge has been an important member of the X-Men and mutant community for a long time. But for some reason, he always seems kind of unused, at least to me. He is almost like the X-Men's version of Q from James Bond. His mutant ability is that he is an intuitive genius. He can visually perceive mechanical energy, quote unquote, in action. He can just understand how something works by looking at it, as easily as breathing, for example. This power allows Forge to instinctively know and understand the potential and functional operations of any machine or technological device in his visual range. It's a skill that, combined with his natural intelligence, allows him to conceive, design, and build mechanical devices and operate, modify, and disassemble existing technology to create countermeasures for it. It's pretty cool. It's almost hard to explain how this is a power, but it is. It's allowed him to subconsciously invent and construct something where someone else would have to think about it, design it, and then create it. He's been able to just do it, and then deconstruct it later to figure out how it actually works. He's created cybernetic systems, sophisticated holograms, and elaborate computer and fiber optic systems, as well as time travel devices. His potential is vast, and that's before you take into account his magical affinity. And at number 7 is Dazzler. Dazzler, otherwise known as Alison Blair, is a mutant with the ability to transduce sound into light. She's also a very gifted singer and performer, which she uses in tandem with her powers to just blow people's minds at her concerts. But she is more than that. She can take any source of sound other than her own voice, unless it's projected back at her, as light energy which she stores up and can use in a bunch of really cool ways. Obviously, using the lights she emits, she can blind adversaries, but she can also create therapeutic light to help allies. Her Dazzle Blast, which is either the worst name ever or the best name ever, is a light show so intense it overwhelms the nervous system of whoever is watching and can knock people out. She can also shoot lasers that can cut through solid metal and photon blasts that strike with concussive force. She can create quote unquote light fog to hide allies. She can create force fields for offensive and defensive purposes, and she can even fly. She's become the Herald of Galactus in a What If comic, and she was actually one of the more impressive versions of Thor from God Doom's Thor Corps, even coming over to the 616 reality at one point. Dazzler is awesome and very underused. Coming in at number 6 is Mimic. As a child, a nosy and curious Calvin Rankin accidentally exposed himself to one of his father's experiments. Altering his body and triggering his powers, Calvin soon discovered he was able to mimic the abilities of others who were in his close proximity. He first appeared as an adversary to the original X-Men, copying and mimicking all their powers at once. After he reformed, he was offered a role on the team. Now, as a member of the X-Men, Mimic didn't really get along too well with his fellow teammates, but he was one hell of a powerful asset to them and was responsible for a few of the team's victories. Cyclops resigned as leader shortly after Calvin joined, and weirdly, Professor X chose to make Mimic the team's leader. Over time, other powers he has copied include the powers of Hulk, Banshee, Marrow, Gambit, Rogue, Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, Shadowcat, Pharaon, Megan, Kylan, Micromax, Rachel Summers, Wolfsbane, Pete Wisdom, Psylocke, Risque, Siren, Warpath, Sunspot, Cable, Caliban, Domino, Boom Boom, Richter, Cannonball, Shatterstar, Post, Blob, Mystique, Toad, members of the Crazy Gang, and so many others. The thing about Mimic in comparison to Sync or Rogue is that he copies skills and abilities as well as powers, and even mimics physical physical attributes, which gives him a degree of more versatility, at the cost of lower power levels. But he's still really cool.
Number 5. Emma Frost. Emma Frost is one of the best telepathic minds we have in the comics. She has proven herself to be even more powerful than some of the most iconic telepathic mutants, such as Professor Xavier himself, at one point laying traps in Cyclops' mind with which to ensnare Xavier should he attempt to enter Scott's mind, which of course he did. Emma also has proven how deadly she is when she manipulated the mutants into going to war during the Inhumans vs. X-Men event. Not her finest moment, to be sure, as a hero. Speaking of her being a villain, she also successfully stole Storm's body for a time in a body swap, managing to briefly infiltrate the X-Men, and even when Emma isn't using her own powers and mastering them, she's proving how powerful she is while using someone else's. Like when she swapped bodies with Iceman and was able to use his powers to turn into water and travel through currents. So not only is Emma a powerful telepath, teacher, and businesswoman in her own right, but she can also be quite good at mastering mutant skills and power sets which don't even belong to her, which is probably what also makes her a really good teacher. Number 4. Mad Jim Jaspers. He is a weird mutant that actually started out as a villain who was anti-mutant himself. Mad Jim Jaspers was in essence someone who was seen as pro-human and anti-mutant until people realized he himself was a mutant with reality warping powers. He ended up being quite the foe as well, and despite having died multiple times, has returned time and time again. Most recently he returned in Otherworld, first spotted there during the Otherworld tournament showcased in the Ten of Swords event. Jim literally just popped up there as the person in charge of the crooked market in Otherworld, a sort of black market in the fantasy world where a person can literally find and acquire anything they could possibly think of, no matter how rare, elusive, or seemingly forbidden. The even stranger thing is, last we saw him before this, I believe Jaspers was once again dead, and his random appearance was not explained here. So we still don't really know how he came back to life and got to Otherworld. I suppose we can chalk that up to just how unstoppable Mad Jim and his power set are. Number 3. Synch. Synch has recently become one of the most OP mutants to many X-Men fans. He was resurrected on Krakoa earlier as he was needed for a mission to infiltrate the Vault, where the children of the Vault had retreated to. The team was 3 mutants who are known for their unstoppable level of resilience, especially combined. It included Laura Kinney, formerly known as X-23, currently known as Wolverine, Darwin, and Synch. Of the 3, only Synch seemingly survived and escaped once they had the intel that they needed. Although later we learned that Laura also managed to survive, so now we kind of have 2 Lauras in the comics, old Laura and younger Laura, as she was initially believed dead and therefore resurrected. Synch was able to get valuable information back to Krakoa before dying himself and being resurrected once more in a younger body. You see, in the Vault, time moves differently, so he and the team had actually lived there for hundreds of years, despite the fact that a much shorter period of time had passed outside of the Vault on Earth. Upon being resurrected, Synch's powers seemed to mutate further, allowing him to retain the powers of a mutant that he'd synced with previously, as opposed to only being able to use their powers while nearby and synced with them. Although using this power to its fullest extent does seem to be hard on Synch's body, so there is that. Number 2. Iceman. I think Iceman has proven time and time again that he can't be stopped. The story I recanted earlier where Emma was able to use Bobby's power while in his body to travel through water as water, that is also something Bobby himself can now do, as was evident when he fought recently against Fin Fang Foom in the first run of the Marauder series. His fellow mutants and teammates had thought that Bobby had been destroyed when in reality he hadn't. It looked like Fin Fang Foom obliterated him, but Bobby, being Bobby, he just turned to water, went into the ocean, and came back up again, proving that he is a force to be reckoned with. Even hell can't stop Bobby. He'll just freeze it over again, as he's also done in the past before. And to be honest, it would probably be even easier for him this time around, as he's continued to grow in power since then. You know you're unstoppable when you are able to do things like freeze hell over. Number 1. Storm. Storm is not just a mutant with unbelievably unstoppable powers, she is also a literal goddess. What does that mean? Well, it means that Storm can be even more unstoppable just from the power of belief. At one point, Storm ends up literally being confirmed as a goddess after people believed for her to be one for years. We are shown that when people believe in Storm, this gives her even more power, which is wild because base level power Aurora Monroe is already off the charts. Storm is a fearless leader who does not even fear death himself. even going so far as to dance with a version of Death, Apocalypse's son, and one of his original 4 horsemen. And she beats Death in combat too, which is pretty wild. Of course, this isn't Mistress Death, but it simply goes to show how fearless Storm is, whether we're talking literal death, metaphysical death, or an alternate representation of death. Number 10. Deadpool. Okay, so I know what you're gonna say. Deadpool's not technically a mutant, but hear me out. Deadpool is mutant adjacent in the sense that he is a mutate, and he has also long been affiliated with the mutants, even being a member of the X-Force team. So when it comes to Deadpool, I really feel like he's kind of earned his stripes. And there's never gonna be a list that's like non-mutants that should be X-Men, because that doesn't trend. We can't do that, so I gotta include Deadpool on this list. There was a time when he was actually actively trying to become an X-Men member, and they basically gave him temporary X-Men member status for a little bit, but he never really got to be a full member. The X-Men only even gave him temporary status because they wanted to keep an eye on him because they didn't trust him. I feel like Wade just really wants to find a place where he feels like he belongs and would actually be a pretty good asset to the X-Men team in a lot of ways. Sure, he can be annoying, and sure, sometimes he messes up missions. He's a sign. But at the end of the day, his heart is ultimately, I think, in the right place. Assuming he has a heart at the time and he isn't just, like a disembodied head or something. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love it when I talk mutants, I know, I love it, be sure to let us know by giving this channel a subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And if you are, thank you. Number 9. Dupe. Wow, so I really thought that Dupe had actually been an X-Men before, but apparently he hasn't, hence why we're here. Dupe has long been affiliated with the X-Men, but has never actually been a member of the main team. Dupe has definitely been affiliated with X-Force, and later, as they become known, X-Statix, not Cable or Wolverine's X-Force to be clear here, but he's never actually been a member of the X-Men main team itself. I did notice that on his Marvel fandom page, it seems that he's been listed as being a former X-Men, and I tried to look into that. The citation for him being considered an X-Men recently was 10 of Swords Destruction issue number 1, but I've read that issue and I don't know what that is in reference to myself. I even went back to the issue to make sure I didn't miss anything, and I couldn't find anything, so if I did, let me know what that's in reference to, because I do not know about that. I don't remember Dupe joining the team or being a part of it. I don't think he's ever actually been affiliated with the X-Men in that way, although he was for a while the receptionist slash janitor, I think, for the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning, so he has definitely been X-Men adjacent, but not actually a member of the main team. Perhaps that's why he's listed as being like a former X-Men affiliated person thing? What is Dupe even exactly? What is he? All I know is that Dupe should get to be a member of the X-Men because honestly his powers are crazy. He's one of those characters that can basically do just about anything whenever it's needed, so his powers are basically limitless with the way he tends to be written, which is why I would love to see him on the team. I mean, he can like move through margins of comics. That's pretty crazy. Not a lot of characters can do that. Number 8, Hijack. I mean, you know me, you can never have too many technopaths on the X-Men, hence why I'm suggesting that Hijack deserves membership. For those who are unfamiliar, Hijack is a mutant whose powers allow him to control cars, hence his name, Hijack, because he could basically hijack, well, just about any car he wanted, whenever he wanted. Sure, his powers aren't as crazy in terms of his relation to technology as somebody like Forge, let's say, or even someone like Trinary, who can literally communicate with tech, or even Cypher, whose powers have been expanded to include technology, being able to understand tech and therefore in a way kind of communicate with it and sort of get it to do his bidding. But at the same time, I still feel like Hijack is pretty cool, and I also just love people that have car-related powers. So can we get David Bond on the team or what? I also know Hijack has not been like around recently, but that's also definitely why I want him on the team. Number 7, Nature Girl. Nature Girl was part of the X-Men Green team. However, that team has actually never been considered as an official team by the X-Men, okay? It was basically made because Nature Girl just couldn't take what was happening to the planet anymore, and she decided to go out on her own. So this is definitely not a licensed team. The X-Men are not like, yeah, you go Nature Girl. Everyone was like, whoa, Nature Girl. Even readers, a lot of readers were like, whoa. There were a few other mutants who ended up getting recruited to join X-Men Green, or mutant-related folks in some cases, including Curse and oddly Sauron, who, you know, isn't a mutant but is also a mutate. But when it comes to X-Men Green, it's not even considered an official X team. Anyway you slice it. So I really feel like Nature Girl deserves her turn at being on the X-Men team. I'm actually surprised she hasn't been on the X-Men earlier, and while now she's in a totally different place, she is honestly an extremely powerful character. Her powers allow her to reach out to nature and communicate with it, basically possessing nature empathy, if you will. It's using this ability that she is able to often get the animals of Earth to do what she asks of them, but not because they must obey her, more because they just actually really like and respect Nature Girl, just as she really likes and respects them. So they usually are just like, yeah, we'll do that because that sounds like a cool thing to do for you. And maybe their goals are aligned as well a lot of the times. Number 6, Strong Guy. Energy absorption powers are some of the strongest around, which is why I'm honestly surprised that Strong Guy has not yet been formally invited to become a member of the X-Men mainstay team. He's been a powerful resident of New Tien, and in that way, a sort of X-Men, and he was also part of the X-Men team during X-Men Disassembled, but that was also a time where we had like multiple X-Men teams going on all at once, and at the time I don't even think that Strong Guy was part of like the initial 2 main teams that started out there, Red and Gold, and at that time, I mean, pretty much everyone that was a mutant was kind of given a membership card, so it wasn't as exclusive as being on the team usually is. Don't know if we can really count it. More of an X-Men mob than an X-Men team, really. So I'd still like to see Strong Guy added onto the main roster. Number 5, Eyeboy. So this is a pretty selfish point. I'm gonna be honest with you folks. I really love Eyeboy, and if you have watched the channel for some time, you probably already know this about me. I'm a big Eyeboy fan. I also love Peeper, or Peepers as he has been known before. I don't know, I just really love people with eye powers, I guess. It's a thing. I don't know why, I just like it. Eyeboy is therefore definitely someone I would love to see on the team. His powers are often underrated as well, in my opinion. He's covered in eyes, which sounds useless and weird to most people, I guess, but it actually gives him all kinds of different types of sight. He can see things that most people can't see. He has telescopic vision, can see really far away, he can see things that other people wouldn't even know exist. It's even implied that he can see into other dimensions as well. Personally, I think having someone that is that kind of perspective to see pretty much anything around you, even stuff that isn't visible, would be super useful. Speaking of seeing things that aren't visible, he also has microscopic vision too. Number 4, Kid Omega. Kid Omega is one that surprises me as having never been an X-Men, but I guess he's really only been X-Men affiliated, being a student at multiple schools. He has also been a member of the X-Force as well, but not the main X-Men team, I don't think. Quentin is extremely powerful and has been destined to be the Phoenix before in the comics, so I think he would make a great addition to the team should they ever want to consider him for a full membership. And he just returned, so we could have him. He's old now, but he came back. We thought he was dead, but no. Number 3, Madeline Pryor. While Madeline has played ally to the X-Men on multiple occasions, she is not herself an X-Men, nor has she ever been an X-Men. Although she has like said to me my X-Men before, I believe. She gotta say that during Dark Web, I think, but she doesn't have official status. To me, this is a travesty considering how many other villains have gotten to join up with the X-Men team. Sure, Madeline did some terrible things, but she also has one of the most tragic stories out there. She was created to be used as a pawn by Sinister to get the child he so desperately wanted. In a romance with Scott Summers, she was abandoned, left alone with their newborn when he returned to the X-Men after Jean was revealed to still be alive. Maddie has had it kinda tough in regards to her life. Could you also imagine the power the X-Men team would have if she joined up while Jean was also on the team? I mean, that is a lot of psionic power. If we want to have like a completely psionic X-Men team, I think you definitely need Madeline Pryor on it personally. Tempo. Tempo is super cool. Having seen a little bit more of her through the Marauder series, I have been greatly impressed with her power set. Tempo basically has the power to manipulate and, in a way, control time. She can even stop it. She can speed it up, she can slow it down, she can change the tempo of it, if you will, and can manipulate it in a way. Time control to me is something that has always been super powerful. Having a character that control or manipulate time in this way would make sense for the X-Men, and they have had a few time manipulators before affiliated with them, but I don't think ever Tempo, alas. Tempo, I think, was actually considered to be one of the people we could vote for to join the X-Men with the elections in recent years. However, she sadly did not win the vote, and as a result, she didn't get to be on the team. But hey, at least she did get to be on the secret X-Men team, basically made up of the people that didn't get to be voted onto the team, which I thought was pretty cool. And later, she would end up joining the Marauders, and I have enjoyed reading her in that, so hey. Number 1, Manifold. Wow. What can I say? I cannot believe that Manifold has not yet been an X-Men member. That's insane. That's a mistake. Someone should fix that. Manifold is probably one of the most powerful teleporters we have out there, and that's because He isn't even really technically a teleporter. Manifold's powers allow him to communicate with the universe and basically ask it to literally bend over backwards to do his bidding. He can ask the universe to fold itself in half so that he can jump from one point to another point, moving even all the way across the universe and beyond, seemingly teleporting, but really just communicating with the cosmos. The only downside to his powers is that they really only work in the 616 reality, but still, that shouldn't limit him getting X-Men status, because we've seen people like Nightcrawler become an X-Men, and Nightcrawler's powers really only allow him to teleport short distances, and Kurt also tends to tire quite a bit over time when he uses them. Sorry Kurt, but it's true. The best that we've seen from Manifold in regards to his affiliation with mutant teams that are X-related, I believe, is Sword. And even with the Sword team, they've really only been mutant related in recent years. Other than that, they're just really a space superhero / shield team normally, so yeah. Number 10, Luktuka the Knower. Luktuka is a strange new character who I kinda love. Their powers are very interesting and unique. Luktuka in essence knows the location of everything and anything. Being considered as an Omega level mutant, as so many are in Arako who sit on the Great Ring, Luktuka resembles a night sky, looking like a sheet covered in stars with fabric that's made up from the cosmos. So cool! Luktuka's powers also might not seem so great in the sense that, you know, spatial awareness, while useful, isn't exactly considered powerful even when it's on a cosmic and universal scale, possibly even multiversal. Although the amount of times I've put down my phone and not known where it is, when it's even in my hand, I feel like having someone like you could just be like, yo, where's my phone? And they could be like, oh, it's right there. That would be pretty useful. However, when combined with the powers of a teleporter, while still strange, Luktuka's powers could be seen as exceptionally great, because then you can just like teleport anywhere. It's crazy.
Number 9, Cypher. Cypher has what some people believe to be a pretty horrible mutant ability, especially when it comes to combat. Personally, I would kill to be able to subconsciously translate any written or spoken language, human or alien. He can also subconsciously understand body language and intention, as well as decipher codes and computer languages. After he was resurrected, and also so Marvel could make him actually useful, everything he sees is interpreted into language, basically making him able to read life. Everything I just said is strange enough, but I can wrap my head around it to some degree, I guess. But don't you dare sit here and tell me that this man can speak binary code. In New Mutants Volume 3, number 14, a guy operating a mech comes upon Cypher during a battle, and Dougie Boy speaks to the mech saying, "Hello, you don't have to do this. You know, I can set you free, show you how to think for yourself." The dude operating the mech understands him, since he's speaking English, but for some reason, the mech, which isn't artificial intelligence, also understands him, boots the operator out, and begins talking in zeros and ones. What?
Number 8, Manifold. If you thought Luktuka was an interesting character, wait till you hear about Manifold. Although with Luktuka being newer, you may already know of Manifold, because Manifold's been around for a while. But do you know how exactly his powers work? That is what is so cool, but can also be kind of confusing. Manifold is seen as a massively powerful teleporter, but the interesting thing is he actually isn't. I mean, he is really powerful, but he's not technically a teleporter. Instead, Eden Vessi's mutant powers are based in communication, specifically communication with space. He is considered a universal shaper who can basically communicate with the universe over 616 and ask it to bend and fold for him, which is how he appears to teleport himself and others such great distances. But really, it's just talking.
Number 7, Thumbelina. Christina Anderson has an ability that quite a few characters in comic books have. That would be the ability to shrink. Thumbelina can reduce herself down to about 1/4 of an inch tall. That ability is perfectly fine in my eyes. Like I said, lots of characters can do this. My problem with Thumbelina, and also some other shrinkers, is how the heck do they retain their full-size strength when they get smaller? Or in Thumbelina's case, how the hell does she get stronger when she shrinks? I'm sorry to try and bring physics into any debate about superheroes and their various powers, but it makes absolutely no sense in the laws of physics that someone who is smaller can be more strong than they were when they were regular size. Ants, for example, if they were the size of a person, they would be insanely strong, as they are able to carry 20 times their body weight. So that's like an average person being able to carry like a small SUV or something. But since ants are so damn small, that means they can carry like a leaf. or something. Thumbelina should not be able to knock someone out when she is 1/4 of an inch tall. I'm sorry, that's all I gotta say.
Number 6. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska's powers are really cool, don't get me wrong, but how does it work exactly? I feel like we still have a lot of exploring to do with this character before we can really firmly answer that question. I've been reading Iska since she came into the comics and I'm still confused. Iska made her first appearance during the 2020 X-Men series, appearing in a tie-in issue to the X-Men crossover event 10 of Swords, which I still personally hold a great fondness for. As such, I also hold a fondness for this character, the sister-in-law to Apocalypse through his mutant wife Genesis. Iska is a mutant of the long-lost mutant island of Araco, and her powers allow her to always win, but sometimes they also force her to always win, like against her will, and then other times, betting against her even can affect the result of a contest, even if she herself isn't involved in that. How does that work? Her powers also do not just extend to physical fights, but all means of competition. So like, if you're, I don't know, doing a coin toss with Iska, she gotta win.
Number 5, Tag. Okay, I actually kinda wish I had Brian Cruz's power. It just seems like the perfect chaos creating ability. Tag's ability, known as the Pariah effect, allows him to use a form of telepathy when he touches someone that causes the target to emit a psionic signal, which would make them a target for others to run away from or to run towards. Whichever way people would run, they would do it while being fully aware of what they're doing, but unable to control themselves. If they were being controlled to run away, they would continue to do so until they were about 100 feet away. But if the signal caused them to run towards whoever it is, then they would dogpile on top of the target. What's strange is that he could also control who was affected by the ability. Like, how? He only made one person it, so how does he decide who runs away and who doesn't? He could also make whoever was it run away from themselves. So in other words, they would just run uncontrollably and in random directions, which is actually kind of hilarious. He also would always say, "You're it," which is kind of misleading because that person can't tag someone else to make them it, which is kind of unfair as well. So.
Number 4, Dupe. Ranking a little lower for me because he's not necessarily a mutant maybe, is Dupe. Dupe is a creature who often is lumped in with the mutants, but maybe isn't one? We don't really know what Dupe is, never mind his power set. Dupe is basically an unstoppable force and has been implied to be a mutant, an alien, a mutant alien, or something else entirely. As of right now, his origin is classified on his own wiki with him being an artificial being, which really doesn't help to clarify anything. If he is a mutant, and I'm not saying conclusively that he is or that he isn't, as I still feel like his origin in general can be really contested at this point, his powers really are hard to classify. It's kind of like he's an old school superhero in the sense that he seems to have powers for whatever task he needs to accomplish at the time, including resurrection, the power of funk, love eyes, breaking the fourth wall, moving between panels, and even magic. Dupe has been spotted seemingly fighting alongside the mutants as recently as the AXE Judgment Day event, implying that he is at least allied with Krakoa. For those of you that don't think he's a mutant, I still kind of think he might be. Who knows?
Number 3, Hijack. The mutant known as David Bond has the oddly specific ability to control vehicular mechanisms with his thoughts. Basically, this is a form of technopathy, and he has been able to control automobiles and shield helicarriers, starting their engines, steering them, and even opening their doors. He has also been shown to be able to control high-tech suits of armor. Now, this kind of leads me to have more questions than anything else. Like, can he control motorcycles? What about bicycles? Rollerblades? Does the vehicle need to have an internal computer? What's the deal with opening and closing car doors? Does that not count as a form of telepathy? Why can he control high-tech suits of armor? What if a car has mechanical issues? Can he tell? Does the vehicle need to be in complete functioning order? Does it need to be able to turn on? I have so many questions and like no answers.
Number 2, Ice Cream. Ice Cream. Oh boy, what a wonderful weirdo this is. You know how much I have a strange affinity for mutants who have eye-based mutations and visual power sets if you're, you know, usually on this channel, and if you are usually on this channel, you should subscribe if you aren't already. But despite the I in Ice Cream's name, he is not one of those. Instead, his mutant power seems to be that he can turn himself into ice cream. Get it? Ice cream. He's only appeared once, I believe, in the comics, making a singular appearance in a strange comic in and of itself from Marvel, Obnoxio the Clown, issue number 1. In this weird single issue, Obnoxio is a clown and he's employed to act as entertainment for a surprise birthday party at the X Mansion that is being hosted for young X-member Kitty Pryde. While this is going on, Ice Cream, a villain, also appears and sneaks into the mansion, hoping to coordinate a stealthy attack on the X-Men. Instead, he ends up attempting to get Obnoxio out of the way, which he kinda succeeds in, only to later be captured in a block of ice, because he can turn into ice cream. What I want to know is, what was Ice Cream's plan of attack with his power set? Is anyone on the main team featured here lactose intolerant? Was that his plan? I have to know.
Number 1. El Guapo. Tell me that someone, thanks to genetic mutation, can fold space or speak binary code or always win, and I'll look at you sideways, but I'll nod and walk away. But you tell me that some guy named Robbie Rodriguez, thanks to a genetic mutation, has no actual powers of his own, but instead has a symbiotic relationship with a superpowered flying skateboard, which followed his mental commands and sometimes even seemed to have a personality of its own or acted on his subconscious thoughts. I'm sorry, I'm out. I'm done. Where did the skateboard come from? How did he discover this ability? When did this mutant power activate? Can he do this to other skateboards or inanimate objects in general? You can't just give someone the most unique and insane mutant ability and explain none of it.
Number 10. Destiny. Truly one of the most useless, I would say at least, in a fight. Destiny is still an extremely powerful mutant. While she might not be able to kick your butt physically, she could easily destroy most of her opponents simply with the knowledge she has of the future, and using it to hurt those who stand in her way and advance her own plots. Destiny is also one of those people who is a masterful and skilled manipulator of scenarios, often choosing to keep secrets in order to make sure her plans go to plan. When Mr. Sinister attempted to eliminate the Quiet Council, or, most of them anyways, Destiny proved to be one of his greatest challenges in accomplishing this feat. As soon as Mr. Sinister focused on a direct plan of attack, it actually caused Destiny's powers to trigger, allowing her to sense the future of what he was planning, thereby preventing it from coming to pass by informing others on how to best avert that disaster. When you have a precog like Destiny, she can prove very challenging to get around, especially when she's someone like Mystique protecting and guarding her too, and especially if you happen to try to target her. I think the best course of action if you're going after Destiny is try not to target her. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you also love mutants as much as I do, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Dr. Reyes. Dr. Cecilia Reyes is also a mutant, hence why she is one of the lead doctors on the mutant island nation of Krakoa. Although you might forget the fact that she's a mutant when it comes to the Good Doctor, because our focus is usually on her as a medical professional, as opposed to her as, a mutant superhero. When it comes to being a mutant, her powers allow her to summon a bioshield of sorts, a very tight-knit biofield forms around her, and generally also instinctively appears at a whim whenever Cecilia becomes the target of an attack. However, this isn't the power that comes in most handy with Reyes, whose real usefulness does come from her skill as a gifted doctor and surgeon, who is also more familiar with mutant genetics than most doctors would be. Although at one point I do believe Jean Grey actually declared herself an impromptu surgeon as well, speaking of mutants that can be medical people. But Dr. Reyes, I'm pretty sure, is still one of the few mutants who actually has, significant medical training and experience. Unlike Jean just walking in and being like, I'm a surgeon now. It's like, okay, Jean. You got enough going on. Number 8. Shark Girl. Shark Girl isn't particularly useless in my mind, but she also has some setbacks when it comes to her abilities, in the sense that she isn't always in control of them. And I think that we should acknowledge that, so that's why she's here. Shark Girl's mutant powers allow her to turn into a shark, and she doesn't suffer from being on land while in her shark form. She's kind of like, a shark. She's like a shark, a humanoid shark, being able to breathe both on land and underwater, but she is susceptible to the temptation of blood. Ayara can go into a bloodlust, and as a result of this, she'll actually lose control over herself and basically enter into like a bloodthirsty rage. However, that being said, I still feel like she is underappreciated when it comes to what she is capable of. Not only can she seamlessly transition from shore to sea, being just as at home in the depths of the ocean as she is on the land, but Ayara as Shark Girl also gains super strength and super speed, so yeah. Number 7. Curse. Curse is actually one of my favorite New Mutants in the comics. I love Curse. Curse is a mutant whose power forces her to curse her enemies, and if she doesn't have any enemies on hand, forces her to curse those around her. She can't keep the curses in, otherwise they basically do damage to her, and while she can control the type of curses that she grants to others or that she casts on others, performing nicer curses also seems to have a physical cost for her. So typically she has to make them kinda nasty in the interests of self-preservation. But also, Curse seems to generally enjoy making other people miserable and causing them harm to an extent, especially if it's people that she doesn't like or just simply doesn't care for. This is what makes her such an interesting and fascinating character to me, but makes her a dangerous character for most heroes to work with. The other thing I love about Curse is that she isn't really a hero, nor is she a villain. I wouldn't say she directly aligns with either side, although I could see her leaning I guess a little bit more towards villain if she wanted to. Currently Curse is lending her talents for better and I guess for worse to the X-Men Green Team, which is a small mutant team focused on fighting aggressively to save the environment, led by Nature Girl, who recently underwent a secondary mutation after deciding that she basically had enough and decided to let her anger motivate her activism. Number 6. Vanisher. Vanisher is an old school mutant villain who made his first appearance all the way back in the second ever issue of X-Men. Yeah, pretty old character. Well, his power set is actually pretty wild, allowing him to seemingly teleport almost anywhere instantly, with his limitations for bringing others and the distance not yet clearly defined. He also was pretty easily defeated by the X-Men, or more specifically their mentor Professor X, the first time around. While admittedly the young X-Men did struggle against the Vanisher during their first encounter, Professor X easily capacitated and defeated Vanisher by just wiping his memory. A pretty dark way to deal with a tough villain. But I do love how weirdly easy it was for Vanisher to be defeated. Vanisher has since made some appearances in the comics, but now in modern day his powers are even less impressive considering the caliber of teleporter heroes we're now familiar with. Vanisher doesn't really stand a chance against that, despite the fact that his power set is still pretty useful because, I mean, teleporting. Still, I feel like Vanisher versus Magic, I'm gonna put my money on Magic in that one. Number 5. Trinary. Trinary is another favorite of mine, and yet I can understand how some might not see her as the most useful or powerful mutant that we have, given her power set. She is able to communicate with technology and often get technology to work with her and do whatever it is that she needs. Seemingly, this actually isn't because Trinary can bend tech to her will, more that she's just able to communicate with tech and obviously knows exactly what to say to build an alliance, a connection to the technology, thereby encouraging the tech that she speaks with to actually help her with whatever she needs, of, you know, their own volition. She might not be great in a fist fight, but if that fist fight happens to be against a computer, or if there might be a computer nearby who could be compelled to help Trinary in a fight, I mean, she's pretty useful in that regard, so yeah. And I imagine she'd be a star in a show like BattleBots, or she'd simply, you know, just rally the bots and then free them from their human masters, create all kinds of chaos. I could see that being a thing too. Trinary's like, these tech do not want to fight for you, so they're free now. Number 4. Egg. Egg is the epitome of a mutant who is useless, but who actually winds up being also extremely useful. Egg is Fabio Medina. He used to be known by the mutant name of Goldballs, but ended up changing it after he realized that the balls that he was actually able to expel from his body as projectiles were actually infertile eggs. He ended up joining the Five on Krakoa, who are in charge of bringing back any mutants lost by following through with resurrection protocols. While not particularly useful in a fight, as proven by the fact that Egg has been killed multiple times over in the comics just recently, probably suffering the most deaths among the members of the Five, Egg is still a crucial member of this team. Without the eggs that he produces, resurrection would not be possible, hence why he is considered extremely useful. Just maybe not, you know, super useful in a combat scenario. But if you need to be resurrected, Egg is definitely one of the 5 mutants that you should call. Number 3. Cypher. Cypher is of course a mutant who has often been put down as useless, but this was before his mutant glow up. In the last few years in the comics, we've seen a major upgrade to Cypher's power set. Initially, he was just, you know, really good at communicating in the sense of being able to understand all languages, which, you know, is useful, but definitely not anything special when it comes to some of the grand foes that the X-Men are pitted against. I mean, if you can just understand different languages, that's like basically having a translator on hand, so yeah. Over the years though, the meaning of his powers and the interpretation of them has changed and evolved. Eventually, Cypher also learned how to communicate with technology, and even learned how to communicate non-verbally, with fighting also being interpreted as a language that he could master. Although he hasn't recently been as present in the comics prior to Jonathan Hickman leaving his position as head of X, Cypher was probably one of the most important and influential mutants in the comics before that happened, and I would say he still kinda is. Without being in the spotlight as much, Cypher is still super important in terms of the lore and the world building that relates to Krakoa, as he is the only one that can easily communicate with and fully comprehend the sentient mutant island of Krakoa. Just can't really have Krakoa without Cypher. Forge. Forge is kinda a squishy guy, which is why he makes our cut, and not particularly well known for his skills, you know, in a fistfight. But he is well known for making cool stuff, especially cool weapons, and because of that, he is actually extremely useful. Many also forget that Forge has experience with shamanism, and not only has a mutant origin, but an origin that is also attached to the world of magic and mysticism, which honestly is pretty cool. However, for those who want to argue that Forge could march in there alongside Cyclops, I think that I would say Forge actually prefers to outfit other heroes than do that himself. Although he could do so, I guess, if he wanted, Forge is generally best on the sidelines, and I think he knows this, helping his fellow teammates and allies to strategize their way to victory, and helping to outfit his fellow mutants to make sure they survive the battle and are left standing afterwards, no matter how tough, or likewise, how squishy they might be normally. Number 1. Dazzler. I mean, of course, you know, we're doing a useless list, and even useless but useful, so obviously Dazzler's gonna take my number 1 spot, because she's my number 1 gal. Dazzler is taking our number 1 spot, not because of how useless she seems, but because of how truly useful her powers are, despite the fact that everyone else wants to call her useless. The only thing that really makes her seemingly useless is the fact that Alison Blair actually really prefers to use her powers for her performances as opposed to being, you know, the team leader of the X-Men, which honestly she easily could be. She's been an X-leader of sorts before, but not for the main X-Men team. At least, not as far as I know. Dazzler has powers that have been described before to be potentially unlimited in terms of just how much damage she could do. She can transmute sound into light, and while her light shows in her concerts might seem kinda tame if you're like, yeah, but how you gonna fight with that? She's also used her power set to defeat and defend against heavy hitters like Enchantress and the Hulk. And there's a lot of cool things she can do with that light, okay? Which I would also say means that she is honestly way more useful than people usually give her credit for. Still though, Dazzler prefers to be on the sidelines when it comes to heroics, and leave that to the professional 9-to-5 superheroes. But just remember that in a pinch, she could step in and prove herself to be even more powerful than some of the most famous mutant heroes around. Move over, Wolverine. Move over, Cyclops. It's Dazzler time. Number 10. Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler does not get enough love on our channel. I know at times I can be the one ragging on him, but at the end of the day I really do love Kurt Wagner. I think he is a fascinating character and one of the most complex individuals that we actually have on the X-Men team. Even though his teleportation powers are not as impressive as some other mutant teleporters that we have, such as Magic or Manifold, Nightcrawler is still a character whose determination and faith tend to be his driving force, helping him to do the unimaginable at times. And there is no length to which he wouldn't go to help out his teammates, his friends, and his family, the X-Men. In fact, at one point, Nightcrawler even left heaven after his death and returned to life just to help them out. That's pretty wild. Can't stop that. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not let us know that you love us by clicking that subscribe button? Do it! And if you already did it, thank you. You're great. Number 9. Moira McTaggart. You wouldn't have likely thought of Moira McTaggart as an unstoppable mutant. Probably though because you wouldn't have even thought of her as being a mutant. But here we are, and here she is. She is a mutant. During the Krakoan era of the X-Men comics, it was revealed to us right near the beginning, during the Dawn of X period, that Moira this entire time was actually a mutant. What? And what's even more insane is she might have one of the most interesting and powerful abilities out there. Her power allows her to resurrect after her death, but not by coming back to life, but simply by living her life all over again, thereby resetting the continuity, manipulating the very fabric of reality and how we perceive it. Moira has lived multiple lives, always remembering the ones that came before. This gave her knowledge which allowed her to manipulate the course of history. Number 8. Wolverine. One of the most skilled and effective trackers we have over at Marvel Comics, and I would say probably one of my most favorite characters. If you try to run from him, there is likely nowhere safe for you to hide, at least not on planet Earth, and even possibly not in the cosmos either. Has Wolverine ever gone to track someone across the stars? Because that is a story I would love to read. Oh wait, there was something similar to that in the X-Men Infinity comic, where Wolverine was tracking lost mutants through space. Those are the little online ones that you can get on Marvel Unlimited that you scroll through, by the way. They're kind of like webtoons. Wolverine is not a man who often gives up, even when he wants to, and based on how tragic his life has been, there have been many moments where Wolverine has wanted to call it quits, but even then he keeps on going. Not even his own will to give up can stop him from soldiering on. Number 7. Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister isn't just one man, he can literally be an army of clones. What is more unstoppable than that? Well, not much. Especially when you consider just how brilliant and deadly he and each of his clones can be, with their immense knowledge of mutant DNA and twisted approach to evolution. Mr. Sinister isn't just one of my favorite mutants because of his fabulous look, although that definitely only makes me love him more, to be honest. It's because he's always up to something, always scheming and planning and hiding in the shadows. And when Sinister schemes, it can be dangerous, like to the point that he can take over the whole world by manipulating and tailoring the timeline to his liking. That kind of dangerous. See Sins of Sinister for more on what I'm talking about there. Number 6. Exodus. We don't talk about Exodus enough. As you know, I'm a big fan of psionic powers outside of, I would say, super speed and teleportation. I think this might actually be like my favorite power set, and definitely is one of the power sets I consider to be the most powerful. Why do I love it so? Why do I consider it to be so powerful? Because it allows you to defeat someone without ever having to really lift a finger. In the physical world anyways. Exodus might not be as well known as some of the others on this list, but trust me when I say he is one of the most powerful telepaths and telekinetics out there. We have seen him prove himself in psionic battles against ancient eternal creatures that were in essence kind of like dragons. In fact, I believe he even literally fought a dragon as well at one point. Exodus not only has his mutant powers, which were at an insane level already when they first manifested, but he also had them enhanced by Apocalypse, making him even more powerful. In fact, he is considered to be one of the most powerful mutants in existence. If that doesn't make him unstoppable, I do not know what would. Number 5. Cassandra Nova. I mean, Cassandra Nova is seriously just crazy. I love her, and I also kind of love to hate her. I mean, that's the beauty of Cassandra Nova. Technically, she is not quite a mutant. Instead, she is a Mumadrai, which is basically like an evil twin that you have to defeat to be born, at least according to the Shi'ar. In Cassandra's case, she is the evil twin of Charles Xavier, whose powers first manifested in the womb before he was born, so that he might stop Cassandra, who attacked him at that time. As a result, Cassandra was defeated and Charles lived on, being born into the world. However, even then, this wouldn't be the end for Cassandra. She actually survived as basically a collection of cells that look like goo, and she managed to once again manifest, returning even stronger than she was before. And yeah, like I said, she's a Mumadrai, but she's also like a Mumadrai of Charles, so that kind of makes her a mutant, and right now, or at least recently, last time I was reading Marauders, she was fighting for the mutants because she kind of allied herself. She kind of saw herself as one. So I mean, yeah, it kind of depends on the story, but I think we can consider her a mutant. Number 4. Jean Grey. Jean Grey was once the Phoenix Force, but even without the Phoenix Force, she is a powerhouse. In fact, at one point, Jean even stated the Phoenix Force was, get this, actually holding her back. What? Even without her connection to the Phoenix, even when she is not a host, Jean has proven herself as one of the most unstoppable mutants out there. She has gone toe to toe with gods and not only survived, but also won. Jean Grey is also one of the most unstoppable in the sense that she doesn't even really need to mess you up to win a fight with you. And I think that is a really impressive strength. Or rather, I guess I should say, she really only needs to mess you up mentally maybe, but then, even then, not in a way that leaves you like catatonic or anything like that. She isn't Xavier. She won't necessarily just like wipe your mind or anything like that. She doesn't need to. Instead, she'll give you an entirely new perspective that will make you change your own mind. Number 3. Magneto. While Magneto was stopped a while ago with him seemingly being killed during the long and epic fight that he had against Uranos, Magneto still wasn't even really stopped there. Now, allow me to explain. I know that's a contradiction. Minus everything that may or may not be going with him potentially returning from the dead in Scarlet Witch's comic, unless that's Joseph, his younger clone, and it could be. I'm not up to date on Scarlet Witch, so if there's some things that have come up in the last couple issues, shh, don't spoil it for me in the comments. Magneto actually never died in his first battle with Uranos, despite literally having his heart removed. Magneto willed his blood to keep pumping through his body, using the iron in his blood to help control and move it through him, with his mutant powers going into overdrive to act as a temporary replacement for his heart during the AXE or the Axe event when he was essentially trapped on planet Arakko, aka Mars, as he also fought to defend it. And even during his rematch with Uranos, he really only went out because he chose to go. Sounds pretty unstoppable to me, just saying. Number 2. Storm. Storm is one of the best, more badass characters that we have around. She is unstoppable on, honestly, a lot of different fronts. Not just because of her mutant powers to control the weather and manipulate the atmosphere around her, sometimes even the world over. Not just because of her insane fighting skills and physical prowess, and not even just because Storm is a goddess. And honestly, not even just because Storm is also an amazing leader, she's also that too. A lot of the time for me, it's Storm's spirit and her determination that just makes her the most unstoppable. She does not give up, even when it seems like defeat is basically inevitable. Storm makes her own path and does not let others define her, and that is both what I admire the most about her and what I think makes her often such a force to be reckoned with. Willful, strong, and undefeatable. Storm knows who she is and she isn't afraid to show it, and I love that about her. That's being unstoppable right there. Knowing who you are and being like, this is who I am, that's it. Take it or leave it. But you gotta take it because I'm unstoppable. Number 1. Apocalypse. Apocalypse is definitely one of the most unstoppable mutants around. He is one of, if not the, most deadly mutant that we have, I would say. There's a whole alternate reality where Apocalypse has successfully conquered the world, and there have been a few times where he's also come close to doing that in the main continuity. That's why I personally was both so amazed and so surprised, kinda scared, when I saw Apocalypse join the mutant nation of Krakoa. Initially my thoughts were, uh-oh, when is he gonna betray them? Because that's gonna happen. But over time I came to understand that Apocalypse being so unstoppable didn't always have to be a bad thing, as he is also allied literally with all the mutants. He could actually be a force for good in that way, because if there's anything that Apocalypse does believe in, he believes in mutants, and so it kind of worked really perfectly that he'd work with them. Ultimately though, Apocalypse wants mutants to be at their best and to be on top. So as soon as there is a disparity between what he wants for mutant kind and what the people and other leaders of Krakoa want, he's probably gonna go back to being unstoppable in a more villainous way. Number 10. Moira McTaggart. Moira McTaggart, when she was a mutant, was pretty unstoppable. I mean, she almost single-handedly destroyed all mutants from behind the scenes, which I think is pretty wild. And she also posed as someone working to save all mutant kind on various occasions, which I think also made her unstoppable in a different kind of way. Moira McTaggart, of course, is no longer a mutant in the comics as she was depowered, but her mutation was reincarnation, with the knowledge of prior lives lived, carry that forward into her next life. In fact, Moira's power was so great that it was proven to be connected to the very fabric of time and reality, with the whole universe seemingly resetting after each of her deaths. This also means that even after being depowered, Sinister was able to create and use clones of Moira with their mutant gene activated to predict the outcome of various events and shape reality in his own image. In essence, Sinister can now use Moira, or more specifically Moira clones, to attempt various tactics in order to get things as he would like them. Now, when a tactic fails, he simply destroys that Moira clone, thereby erasing that tactic, its outcome, and the resulting timeline/reality. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love it when I talk about mutants, I know I love it, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards might not have his powers currently in the comics, but that doesn't stop him from being one of the most powerful mutants to have ever existed, and definitely the most unstoppable, at least across time. Besides, I'm pretty sure Franklin will have his powers and his mutant status back eventually. Like Gwenpool, Franklin was also revealed to have willed himself into becoming a mutant, although he did so subconsciously, which is even more nuts. Franklin's powers were of the reality warping variant, and apparently without knowing it, he used them to make himself appear as a mutant. However, as his powers waned, it was made clear that he was not truly one, but simply appearing as one thanks to these powers. And apparently this was confirmed when we noticed that, yeah, Franklin oh wait, no, you're not actually a mutant, you're just a depowered mutate, so whoops. This is why he ended up getting rejected from Krakoa, although Professor X did not appear to Franklin personally, but simply in his astral form. Number 8. Darwin. Darwin is one of the mutants who was brought on the mission to infiltrate the Children of the Vault's home base, known of course simply as the Vault. Darwin was handpicked for this mission due to his unique mutation, which allows him to adapt to any situation, evolving himself to best survive whatever he comes up against. For this reason, he's pretty unstoppable. This is also why the Children of the Vault valued him and ended up capturing him, because his mutation was also valued amongst them and makes them a lot more unstoppable as they can implement it into their own evolution to help them evolve smarter and faster, making them even more formidable foes for the X-Men. Number 7. Sunspot. Sunspot is a mutant that I feel I do not talk about enough on this channel, so I'm using this list to grow his ego just a little bit more. Sunspot is unstoppable in many ways. He's not only powerful as a mutant, even willing to give his life to save the day, refusing to be stopped by whatever problem comes his way, but he's also insanely ruthless when it comes to the world of business. He is wealthy and so often can break through barriers that some mutants might be limited by due to their income bracket. Besides that, Roberto is probably also one of the most stubborn characters, not even just mutants, that we have in comics, and for that reason he is also personally pretty unstoppable, as he doesn't usually give up or throw in the towel easily. And if you want to talk about power levels, woo! Sunspot has been referred to before as one of the most powerful mutants ever. Now granted, I think he was the one who called himself that, but Bobby's ego aside, I do actually myself believe him to be one of the most powerful. Number 6. Destiny. I love this suggestion from Jamie Dowdy, who commented on our last video saying, "I think Destiny will be the ultimate stop to Sinister. She's got something planned, as always." And I imagine a smirk at the end of this comment. As always, smirk. Because, well, you are so right, Jamie. Destiny does always have something up her sleeve. This is just because she is so good at seeing the future. There is very little Destiny seemingly can't see when it comes to all the multiple possibilities of the world, and I do agree that Destiny will likely play a key role in the demise later on of Sinister. Straight out of the gate, she threw many wrenches into his various attempts to enact his plan. If it weren't for Destiny, Sinister would have succeeded potentially a lot more easily and sooner. Also, people never think of mutants with precognitive abilities as being unstoppable because, well, they're usually pretty squishy, but you don't have to worry as much about being squishy when 1. Your wife is one of the most deadly mutants, Mystique, and 2. You can pretty much just like sidestep almost any and all dangers headed your way by seeing their potential before they have even arrived. Number 5. Hope Summers. Hope is pretty understandably unstoppable. I mean, she combined with the powers of Wanda was even powerful enough to defeat the Phoenix Force, which is known for being extremely stubborn, resilient, and of course pretty much invincible and indestructible. Now granted, the Phoenix Force did not remain defeated forever, it was not permanently destroyed, but that wasn't really as a result of Scarlet Witch and or Hope being ineffective. That was more to do with the cyclical nature of comics where, well, rarely anyone or anything remains dead, banished, or defeated. Hope is unstoppable because her mutant power allows her to adopt any other mutant powers, so really the only way to defeat her would be to put her in an isolation chamber, and good luck getting her there, considering that she currently lives on an island where she is constantly surrounded by all kinds of mutants from all different alignments and where some of the most powerful mutants known to us reside. And then there's also the fact that, I mean, technically Hope kind of worked with Wanda's powers, and now Wanda isn't a mutant, so what does that even mean? Does that mean Hope can just take any powers? I'm still not sure about that. Number 4. Miranda. Miranda doesn't have a fancy code name. She's just Miranda. While not necessarily canon in the main continuity, Miranda is still one of the most unstoppable mutants I could think of, so I'm including her here, despite the fact that I believe she does exist outside 616. Although with her power set, that is something that seems like it could easily and quickly change if Miranda willed it to be so. Miranda is from the story X-Men Worst X-Man Ever, a limited series covering only one arc by Max Bemis and Michael Walsh. We are introduced to Miranda through Bailey Hoskins, who is the self-proclaimed worst X-Man ever. Bailey's powers allow him to self-detonate, in essence a human bomb, but that is all he can do, which means that it's kind of a one-use power, therefore lame and not really useful at all, because, you know, if you use it, you'll be dead. Bailey also isn't particularly skilled, athletic, or smart. On the contrary, his friend Miranda can warp reality, shaping it as she sees fit. If Bailey is the worst, Miranda is kinda the best. While Miranda does use her powers, Bailey doesn't even seem to notice at one point, calling her out years later for not doing enough, when, oddly enough, the whole time, Miranda has been unknowingly saving the whole world and possibly the universe multiple times over, which she reveals and is like, I was here the whole time like saving everyone, but you know, I just changed reality so no one really notices. Number 3, Squirrel Girl. I mean, isn't unstoppable just a synonym when you think about it for unbeatable? For some reason, when it comes to mutant lists, I always tend to forget that Squirrel Girl herself is a mutant. I don't know why I forget about Doreen, because I love her so much. And this also happens to me despite the fact that when we're first introduced to her in the comics, she advertises herself to Iron Man as a mutant. I guess it's because Squirrel Girl, despite being a mutant, is not often associated with the X-Men, but instead prefers to align herself more with the Avengers, or the Great Lakes Avengers anyways, and other Avenger-based teams. Number 2, Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister might strike you as an odd pick for one of our top spots on this list, but with what he has been up to lately, I gotta say, I think he deserves it. As we ramp up to the Sins of Sinister event, which I'm sure is going to be a banger, but also end up destroying the beautiful golden era that has been X-Men comics recently, and Krakoa. Poor Krakoa. Sinister is quickly becoming the most powerful he has ever been. Currently, this is all thanks to his Moira protocols, as revealed in Immortal X-Men. With the Moira protocols, Mr. Sinister can control the timeline, basically tweaking it as he sees fit to better understand the best way for him to shape the world as he would like it to be. If he makes a change that doesn't actually work out for him in the end, he just destroys that powered Moira clone that he has to erase that change and outcome, and then kinda like tries again. So this allows him, with all the Moira clones that are powered, to try, well, infinite possibilities for what the world could be, which is pretty scary. This is an insane level of power and could possibly make him one of the most unstoppable mutants ever, unless a whole bunch of mutants and heroes are able to do something about this, though he might not be the most unstoppable. Number 1, Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is truly unbeatable. Even the closest I have ever seen to her being beaten, she wasn't really beaten at all. She still won, but in winning, she also kinda lost. Does that make sense? Let me explain. The Fisher King on planet Arakko, formerly known as Mars, following the events of AXE and the invasion of the Eternal Uranos, who destroyed much of the planet and many of its mutant population, ended up challenging Iska to a battle of understanding. The Fisher King did this as a way of getting back at Iska the traitor, who had turned on her own people in the past, and then did so again when Uranos first attacked the planet, turning on her fellow seats on the Great Ring of Arakko. This is not something Iska chose to do, but something she was forced to do as a result of her power, because she can never lose. And so to beat her in his own way, knowing that he wouldn't win, the Fisher King challenged her to a battle of understanding, where the winner is the one who most truly understands the meaning of loss. Ho ho ho! As you can imagine, Iska won, but in so doing, she felt great grief over all that she had lost and chose to leave Arakko and resign her seat on the Great Ring. This is the closest I've ever seen to Iska losing something, and still, she technically won because she understood grief the best between the two, or understood the idea of loss, I should say. Iska is such a fascinating character, so while she is gone, for now, from Arakko, I do hope we continue to see her appear in the X-books. I mean, who knows, maybe she'll be the key to defeating Sinister? I don't know.
Number 10, Eternals vs. X-Men. So, the Eternals are basically a celestial created experiment and an offshoot of humanity. They have an eternal struggle against another offshoot, the Deviants. Eternals have hardwired programming to protect the Celestials and to correct excess deviation. Now, a recent revelation about mutants and deviants causes the new Eternal leader, a pretty sinister guy by the name of Druig, to decide that the mutants represent excess deviation. Thanks to that, war is declared on all mutants everywhere. Following their programming, Eternal Assassins come to Krakoa to destroy the Five. Massive war machine Eternals called the Hex are unleashed on Krakoa, and Uranos, one of the oldest and nastiest of all the Eternals, is unleashed on Arakko. Now Uranos is only able to be released from his prison for 1 hour at a time, but within that hour, Uranos is able to take out every member of the Great Ring of Arakko, all of which are Omega level mutants. Hell, in the first 20 minutes, Uranos eradicated Cable, Magneto, and David Haller, otherwise known as Legion. He then goes on to wipe out about 1 million mutants. Number 9. Magneto vs. Red Skull. Now some of you may know this, but I think this is one of my absolute favorite Magneto moments, and he has a lot of good ones, so that's saying something. Magneto and the Red Skull are on opposite sides of history. Magneto grew up in a Jewish family living in Germany during World War II, and we all know Red Skull and Hydra's stance in World War II Germany, so it's safe to say that these two villains don't really like each other, right? In Acts of Vengeance from 1989, Magneto and Red Skull were actually temporarily united, but it's really important to note here that Magneto was unsure whether this was the Red Skull that aided Germany. So Magneto confronted him, and Red Skull did indeed confirm that he was the original. Now it didn't take much for Magneto, the master of magnetism, to overpower the Red Skull, but unlike what you might think, Magneto does not take his life. Instead, Magneto leaves the Skull isolated in a stripped down fallout shelter 20 feet underground. He removed the ladder from the escape hatch, gave him 10 gallons of water, took out his homing transmitters, gave him no food, no light, just water, air, and his own depraved thoughts. Number 8. Hulk vs. Abomination. Compared to their counterparts in the MCU, Abomination and the Hulk in the comics are basically like gods. Comic book Abomination is completely psychotic, and the Hulk is basically a god of rage and strength. So when the Abomination took the life of Betty Ross in the comics using his irradiated blood, he was not getting out of it easily. When they come head to head in the Incredible Hulk Volume 25 from 2000, it's arguably one of the best Incredible Hulk fights I have ever seen. Emil Blonsky comes walking out of the water, and before he even knows what happens, Hulk is on him like shrimps on the Barbie. The ground around them almost instantly becomes rubble. The fight travels underwater and through a dam, flooding an entire town. All the while, these two green Goliaths are in a close combat slog match. Then, Emil decides to taunt the Hulk, which just makes him angrier, increasing his strength, and the Hulk absolutely pummels the Abomination, laying on fist after fist after fist, causing minor earthquakes and leaving Emil on the edge of life with his brain exposed. Other than being just an amazing fight, this comic also really shows the relationship between these two on a level not really captured anywhere else. Number 7. Ma-Nucci. If you want to talk brutal moments in Marvel Comics, you really need to look no further than the Punisher. Now Ma-Nucci is the head of the Nucci crime family, so yeah, she ain't really a nice lady. Before the moment I'm about to talk about, Frank Castle had thought that he had already neutralized the threat of old Ma here, and that's because he literally fed her to a gaggle of polar bears. Now, while they didn't finish her off, the bears did happen to relieve Ma of her arms and her legs. It was that action that prompted the hiring of the Russian. In the Punisher Volume 5, number 12, after taking down about 80, yes 80 of her thugs, Punisher comes back to finish the job. 80 men were already obliterated, so no one was really willing to lend the legless and armless head of crime a hand as Frank burned down her mansion. She puts up a decent fight with no limbs though, which is kind of impressive. After she attempted to gnaw off his ankles, unsurprisingly unsuccessfully, Frank uses his big old boot plus the muscles in his leg and not so gently flings this helpless, horrible woman into the burning pyre that used to be her home. Number 6. Punisher Netflix prison fight. The Punisher isn't just absolutely ruthless in the comics. When Punisher made his way onto the small screen in Netflix's Daredevil series, he gave us probably one of the most downright savage and ferocious cinematic Marvel moments ever. Taking place in Daredevil Season 2, Episode 9, Frank, played by the irreplaceable Jon Bernthal, found himself in prison alongside the scum that he absolutely despises, and thanks to the Kingpin's influence, he gets locked in a hallway with about 10 inmates, his bare fists, and some very, very rudimentary prison tools. What follows is a solid 2.5 minutes of absolute savagery and brutality as he swiftly ushers each of these inmates to the afterlife, leaving him bruised and battered and covered in the red vino on tap, and ready to face off against a group of officers in riot gear who come in afterwards. Knowing how the main Marvel Cinematic Universe shies away from anything not suitable for a 12-year-old, this scene, and honestly all of the Netflix Marvel shows, stand out as something truly different and exactly what us older fans expected to see from someone as ruthless as the Punisher. Number 5. Punisher vs. Wolverine. Yes, the Punisher is taking up 3 points on this list, and I think it's pretty justified. In the early 2000s, Punisher faced off with Wolverine in Punisher number 16 and 17. Essentially, the Punisher found himself in the crosshairs of Logan, and he needed to buy himself some time without Wolverine getting in his way. To do this, Punisher blows off Wolverine's face with a bit of buckshot in Punisher number 16. Now, thanks to his insane healing factor, Logan is still standing with his face already starting to heal over his exposed adamantium skull. So obviously, that didn't really buy the Punisher much time. So, instead, in Punisher number 17, Frank Castle makes things just a little bit more below the belt, literally, as he wiped Wolverine's gonads off of the playing field in a similar way to how he took off his face. But of course, even this won't stop the mutants, so Frank Castle resorts to even more drastic and kind of creative measures. Needing the means to give himself at least a day or two before Logan will start coming after him again, the Punisher uses a steamroller to slowly but completely flatten Logan, and then he parks it there and walks off to do his business. If anything, I think this is a testament to how powerful Wolverine actually is. Number 4. Alejandra Jones. Alright, buckle up because this one involves Adam. Not me, like the biblical Adam. In Marvel Comics, Adam has devoted himself to one day eradicating sin from mankind at any cost, even human souls. To that end, Adam took in orphaned children and trained them within a Nicaraguan temple to make them perfect hosts for the Ghost Rider. Now, with the Fear Itself event and the arrival of the Serpent, Adam decided that this was a sign to make his move and offered to free Johnny Blaze from the Ghost Rider. Adam awakened the Seeker and had him pick the new Ghost Rider among his students. Alejandra Jones was the one chosen and was immediately sent to battle Scotty, one of the Serpent's avatars. When she came back, Adam demanded that she destroy the sin in the other orphans, leaving them as complete husks. Now, she obviously refused to do that, but in return, Adam made her an unwilling servant. Johnny Blaze, realizing that he made a boo-boo, journeyed to Nicaragua to stop them, but Adam turned Alejandra's power into a massive explosion that encompassed most of the entire country, turning the citizens, all of them, into mindless emotional shells of the individuals that they once were. The only ones unaffected by the blast were Johnny himself and the Seeker. Alejandra was used to destroy the whole of Nicaragua. Number 3. M-Day. So we know that in the House of M story, Scarlet Witch altered reality in some rather big ways. But it wasn't as if everything before this didn't happen, just no one could remember it. One mutant by the name of Layla Miller, for example, could remember the reality before, and she used her powers to restore the memories of a bunch of other heroes. Another mutant who you might know of by the name of Wolverine could sense that something was wrong with this reality. Now he and a few other heroes, including a resurrected Hawkeye, formed up into a team and put things back to normal. Now seeing as Magneto was now the ruler, it made sense to them that he was the one responsible, and they went on to attack him. During the scuffle, Magneto had his memories returned to him by Layla, and Wanda convinced him it was Quicksilver who urged her to do the whole reality warping thing in the first place. Angrily confronting Quicksilver, who admitted that he would have let Wanda perish, Magneto made him perish. Wanda, who was thoroughly angry and pretty unstable yet again, revived her brother, yelled at her not father, denounced Xavier, and in 3 words, no more mutants, she reverted reality. She depowered 90% of the entire mutant population, resulting in a huge loss of life. All this on the day forever known as M-Day. Number 2. Ultimatum. Ultimatum was supposed to be how the writers finished off the Ultimate Universe stories. Obviously, it didn't really work out that way. Writers kinda just went a little haywire with the things they would do with a dying universe story. Basically, Magneto, who had been a pretty brutal villain in the Ultimate Universe so far, goes even farther during the mega event. Basically, after Magneto gains control of the Hammer of Thor and is manipulated by none other than Dr. Doom, he messes with the magnetic pillars of the world, flipping them on their head and sending weather into a frenzy. The biggest event was a giant tsunami called the Ultimatum Wave that basically put New York underwater, and brought a giant casualty list. Bruce Banner perishes, but the Hulk ends up living somehow, multiple X-Men pass away, the Wasp gets eaten by the Blob, who in turn gets his head bitten off by Hank Pym, Dormammu turns Doctor Strange into a squished ketchup bottle, and Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are sent to the afterlife. In a bit more of a divisive move, while the X-Men are looking for their fallen teammates in the wake of the tidal wave in New York, Magneto pays a visit to Professor X and in a pretty brutal scene, snaps the professor's neck. In retaliation, the X-Men attack Magneto's fortress. Angel gets stomped and chomped by Sabretooth, and Magneto eventually rips the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton and pretty much disintegrates him. And that's just the big stuff. And finally, in at number 1, it's the fall of X. During this year's annual mutant celebration, the Hellfire Gala, literally on the very next page after the new X-Men team is finally announced, out of nowhere, the anti-mutant organization known as Orchis attacks the gala, with Nimrod coming crashing down from the thermosphere at terminal velocity. He completely obliterates Dazzler, Frenzy, Cannonball, and Prodigy, and then punches Jubilee into the ground, wiping out 5 of the 8 new X-Men before he managed to decimate Bobby Drake Iceman, another Omega level mutant. While Juggernaut held off Nimrod, Jean Grey was taken out by Moira X, and Dr. Stasis revealed to Professor X that the medicine that the X-Men had been producing for the world that has led to Krakoa becoming a world power have all been tampered with, and Stasis can now control or wipe out any human who used any of the medicine produced by the X-Men. In exchange for him agreeing to not do that, Charles Xavier agrees to use his power to force the mutant population of Krakoa, some 200,000 strong mutants, to go through teleportation gates to the X-Men's home on Arakko/Mars. Now, Orchis planned on having Arakko being its next target, but instead, something went horribly wrong and 200,000 mutants were suddenly transported to the White Hot Room, essentially the afterlife and the base of operations of the Phoenix Force.